Thank you. Okay, Madam Attorney, I read this then to start with, right? Okay. So, the executive order number 20-69 issued by Governor DeSantis on March the 20th, 2020 authorized local governing bodies, including counties, to conduct meetings without having a quorum physically present or at any specific location. The executive order also authorized the use of communications media technology for virtual meetings such as audio and video conferencing. Executive order number 20-69 has been extended by subsequent executive orders, including most recently executive order 20-139 issued by Governor DeSantis on June the 5th of 2020. I'm going to go through a roll call for the commissioners, and I'm just going to do it on site here, if that's okay. Commissioner Lindley.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Minor.
Here.
Commissioner Maddox.
Here.
Commissioner Dozier.
Here. Commissioner
Proctor. Yeah, you're muted, Commissioner Proctor, but I see you there. And Commissioner Jackson. All right. I think we have a quorum. For the record, all commissioners are attending the virtual special meeting remotely using Zoom as a cloud platform for video and audio conferencing. If we experience interruptions through disruptions or glitches in the technology being used, I will recess the special meeting until the interruption is resolved. If the interruption cannot be resolved in a reasonable amount of time, I will adjourn the special meeting. The temporary recess or termination of the special meeting is necessary, if necessary, is to ensure compliance with the Sunshine Law. The county attorney will be stating the procedures to be followed during this special meeting. Madam Attorney, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The county issued amended proclamation 2020-7 on April 8, 2020 to modify board policy number 1-5 and temporarily establish procedures for the county to hold virtual meetings as authorized by Executive Order number 20-69 and extended most recently by Executive Order number 20-139. These procedural changes were ratified by the board at its meeting on February 14, 2020. This virtual meeting has been noticed with information for the public to view the meeting in real time on Comcast Channel 16, Prism Channels 16 and 1016 HD, the county's Facebook page, and YouTube channel. The notice also invited members of the public to submit comment until 8 p.m. yesterday evening via the county's online comment form, and instructions were provided to explain how the public could submit comment. If anyone needed assistance submitting public comment, the notice provided a county phone number as a point of contact. The county did not receive any requests for assistance in submitting public comment. The comments submitted through the comment form have been distributed to the commissioners for their consideration prior to any action being taken. These comments have also been posted on the county website so that they can be viewed by members of the public. Comments were received after the deadline, and those comments have also been distributed to the board and posted to the county website. All comments received will be included in the public record of the meeting. With respect to public comment, Section 286.0114, subsection 2, Florida statutes, provides in part that members of the public shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard on a proposition before a board or commission. The request for written comment in advance of the meeting, with a deadline for receipt of such comment well after the meeting agenda and supporting documentation has been published, is compliant with this statutory requirement. I would also note that based upon the expiration date of June 30th, 2020, for Executive Order 20-69, it is anticipated that future currently scheduled Board of County Commission meetings will be held in person, starting with the July 14th, 2020 meeting. Mr. Chair, I have no further statements.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. And we go straight to the public hearings. I just want to make, okay, all right. So the first is the scheduled public hearing. Is it yours, Mr.
Yes.
Administrator?
I've got it. Thank you,
Take it away.
Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, this is the first of two required public hearings to consider adopting an ordinance amending the Leon County Land Development Code, to create a new category entitled the Governmental Operational Zoning District, which is included in Attachment 1, and to schedule the second and final public hearing on July 14th at 6 p.m. There were no comment cards on this, and we are recommending option 1.
Commissioners.
Move option 1.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Maddox seconded Commissioner Lindley's motion. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Commissioner Proctor, are you with us on this one? Okay, I'll assume that thumbs up is good. Okay, we've got the motion carries. Next up, the sheriff, right? Okay, I think at the board's request at the last meeting, we asked that the sheriff come in and give us kind of an update. And we sure appreciate, Sheriff, you taking the time out of your day. I know you've been really busy here for the last couple of months, and we appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to hearing from you. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners. It's my pleasure to come before you. Obviously, I think in going back and listening to the television broadcast of your last meeting, there was a desire to engage with me on some conversation around the issues of the deaf in Indianapolis, and I'm not sure if this also includes the deaths here in Tallahassee, involving Tallahassee Police Department. I did have a number of conversations with commissioners about my perspective, and I think the genesis of your desire to have me here today probably derives from the discussion I had with Commissioner Williams-Cox, where she asked if I would be willing to engage in a conversation around citizen review boards, and obviously my response to her was obviously yes. Any meeting relative to law enforcement, I believe it's my responsibility as your sheriff to be engaged in that discussion. The caveat, however, being that there are some constitutional restrictions with respect to the level of engagement I or any law enforcement chief or sheriff can have, and those are outlined specifically in state law. But I did want to give you guys an opportunity, commissioners, to engage with me. If you have some questions, concerns, desires, if you want to talk about the Citizen Review Committee, I'm certainly open to a discussion about that. So those are my opening comments, and I basically leave it to you, commissioners, and Mr. Chairman, to give me some guidance in terms of what you'd like to, information you'd like to hear from me.
Thank you, Sheriff. Okay, commissioners. Commissioner Dozier has a hand up. Yes, Commissioner Dozier, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff. It's good to see you, and truly appreciate you taking the time to be here today, as the chairman said. I did bring this up last week, but I think there was a unanimous feeling that we would love any opportunity to check in with you. And we have seen a lot of different issues going on in recent weeks, on top of, I know, the incredible coordination the Sheriff's Department has had with our emergency management team, county administrator, and others since COVID started. So thank you for those efforts and for working with us as always. I guess I wanted to start, we are hearing a lot about funding priorities, I'll put it that way, between law enforcement and other issues. We're hearing a lot about how we should treat mental health versus criminal activity. And these are things that, from my perspective, I think we probably all know this, you've worked on for the last few years and actually made a lot of changes on how we coordinate on mental health and other issues, which I truly appreciate. I don't know if you want to say anything more about the Citizen Review Committee. That was part of my question. You've answered that for me in our private conversation, and I think you just summed it up clearly. But I would like to hear a little bit more about how you view this conversation about funding priorities, and I guess briefly some of the ways that you have tried to tackle those issues and coordinate with community partners in recent years.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I think that's a good way of couching our discussion, and I will try to highlight and perhaps give detail about what we're doing. But let me start with the definition that I believe for the term defund the police. And certainly I don't have the answer what that means, but what it means to me and me and my colleagues. And I'm informed, I come to my position on this by being informed by discussions I've had with some of the leaders of the march here in Tallahassee. And I spoke at Florida State University in a Zoom meeting with some of their criminology majors and potential lawyers at some point in time. And here's the perspective that I've shared with them and have gotten back from the feedback was that they agreed with my perspective, which is the notion of defunding the police is all about priorities. What are the priorities of a police department or a sheriff's office? And my priorities are to do what we have to do to deal with the causes of crime that occur in our community, and how do we then prevent those crimes. We did basically an analysis of what's taking place in Tallahassee, Leon County, and concluded that much of our crime is driven by social issues, economic issues. And so in our budget, we've tried to balance the needs that I think the people are asking for, as you just spoke of, which is, it's shameful, quite honestly, that 40% of the persons I have in my detention facility suffer from mental health issues. Now, one would say, and some have said, Sheriff, that's not your lane. But I believe it is my lane. Anything that has to do with public safety and a way of keeping our community safe is a lane that I'm going to always be in. So we went about putting together processes and reaching out to our partners to build some capacity and relationship by which we can do a better job of finding those persons who have mental health issues and then building processes to get them the help they need. Now, so we've focused a great deal of our resources on that particular issue. And I think those are the kind of things that people are asking for. As it relates to domestic violence, which is another front end cost that impacts our community heavily, that we don't really realize in terms of the trauma that our kids see in those homes where domestic violence is taking place. And then those kids grow up in those environments, and as my daughter says, as a psychologist, they're socialized in some respects to act out the same way. And we have to break those patterns of behavior. And so we have worked with our schools, with our school resource deputies. And I think you will see in my budget, I don't know how many of you guys have looked at my budget that I put to you or is coming to you for this year, but in that budget, there's a behavioral science piece that will work, and quite honestly, you probably never heard of a sheriff or police chief asking for a behavioral science unit. Not asking for a lot of people right now. Don't think we need a lot of people, but we do need a particular set of skill sets that can come in and do two things: help us with the issues related to our deputies' interactions with the public and with kids with traumatic situations, and then to have our deputies also, they are dealing with trauma as well and having to deal with those issues as their career progresses. So on two fronts, investing in the psychological help of our community, our children, and the psychological help of our deputy, I think are paramount, and part of my responsibility as your sheriff to look at how we fund those kind of activities in our Leon County arsenal of fighting crime. The other piece of that, and you guys can stop me if I'm getting too winded here for you, but also the reentry component that, I've heard this since I was police chief a long time ago, that the Leon County Jail, as we called it back then, it has the most hotel beds of any hotel in our community. And quite honestly, I have a huge problem with that. And so we're working to try to make sure on several fronts that we reduce that population. I am happy to say to you, working with State Attorney Campbell and with Andy Thomas, our public defender, we're making some significant strides, but obviously it's an adversarial process. And that means, there's some give and take and push and pull, but we're making some strides in that respect of trying to get some things in place through what we call our portal of reentry. That is, About 1,000 to 800 persons come back from prison every year back in our community without any gainful employment opportunities. And we're working to establish, and I want to give kudos to the health department because they've allowed us to use a portion of the health department that's right next to the sheriff's office, the ground floor of that. We're going to make that a portal of reentry, and we will interview people coming back into our community from prison. And in that setting, we'll have social service people there as well, practitioners, and we'll try to match those persons up with the needs they identify to us. If they need a job, if they need counseling, if they need they had drug issues when they were in prison and they're coming back. We're going to try to do that on the front end. And also in our detention facility, as people are going through and getting those kind of needs met while they're in our system, but as they exit, we need to have social service organizations that will follow them back in the community and stay connected to them. And we're trying to expand as you perhaps know, again, they come into our facility, they come in, they lose all of their Medicare benefits because we don't have the Obamacare, wasn't accepted here in the state of Florida. So they lose all of that. And we're trying to work with the state in terms of how we can reconnect those. And let me just stop there and say, those are the kinds of things I believe the community is talking about when they say to us, we need to defund the police. I think they're saying we need to reallocate the dollars so that there's an equal benefit. I don't think anybody in their right mind is saying we don't need the police out there protecting us. But we do need to make sure that law enforcement agencies aren't solely focused on arresting people, locking people up, but also focused on dealing with the social issues that impact our community. I'll stop there. I can talk all day about this stuff. So
I've got a couple other go ahead, Commissioner Dozier. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had two other quick things, unless you want to rip around and come back to me, but I'll just wrap it up here. Sheriff, you have so much that you could talk about related to these new programs in recent years and even new funding priorities, which you told me about last week, and I'm glad you mentioned it today, the behavioral science unit. I really hope everyone will dig into your all-in program if they want to see more of what you've done in the last few years. I agree that this is really the bedrock of a lot of what I'm hearing with the defund comments that have really been elevated in the last couple weeks with the protests. So I have one question about this piece of it, and then I have one other question, Mr. Chair, that I'd like to ask real quick. You have an internal committee. I understand the reasons why we couldn't do the full citizens review committee as it's been articulated by others. That came up at the city commission meeting. But you do have an advisory committee. We worked together for a short time on reentry. I don't think you needed my assistance at all, but you and all of your partners have really done a great job with that. I will say I'm sure Claudia Blackburn from the health department is listening and very happy with the partnership. And we appreciate that too at the health department, being able to use it for your reentry center. But after our call last week, I looked at the statutory language for the PSCC, the Public Safety Coordinating Committee. Is that right? And I've looked at it in the past, but in light of this conversation, it really struck me that it's a group that's focused on detention first, and it does mention healthcare, education, reentry within the reentry context, but it's not really getting to a lot of these other issues. And I'm wondering if, in support of your efforts, our friends at the police department and others, if we could explore an opportunity to either expand the scope of the PSCC discussion with strategic partners, or find some other way to help assess how we're doing and look for some more creative ideas. Not everything can be or should be done within the sheriff's department. Right. A lot of it could be. So I'm just wondering if we could explore that in the next few months, and if you think that would be helpful.
Oh, absolutely, Commissioner. I think great minds. We're a university town with all kind of gray matter out there that could help us, inform us in a better way. So I'm all for that, trying to establish that. Now, I will digress a moment and say, as relates to the council, the citizen review thing, here's what I really would like to see, and your point is better than the point I'm about to make, but what I'd really like to see prior to that comment would have been a group of experts in our community, FAMU, FSU, other experts in law enforcement. What I suggest that we do, oftentimes we start talking about why did this shooting take place? Why did that shooting take place? And we want to have a citizen review, and we want to have up front look at this. And quite honestly, I look at LA and New York and other places that have them, and they haven't helped at all. You still have shootings. You've got citizens that are looking at and investigating crime. What we found is that citizen reviews actually are more lenient on officers than the internal affairs process is or the sheriff's process is, because we know it a lot better. We don't have that kind of sympathy thing, at least in my case, I hope. But what I'd rather see is on the front end, as opposed to we're always trying to deal with the back end of it. And what I mean by the front end is I doubt if any commissioners has ever seen my use of force policy. I doubt if any of the city council have seen the Tallahassee Police Department's use of force policy. I don't know how often those policies are upgraded and that sort of thing. But what we should have is an ongoing group of intellectuals. I'm trying to find the best word here, but a group of folks that really understand the law and understand police work and can sit down on an annual basis or a monthly basis, or however, and look at those policies and adjust and say, make recommendations. Why does this particular policy exist? We think that policy has an adverse impact on citizens of our community. And we can have those discussions back and forth. But trying to have those discussions each time as we do and all across our country. Because I've gone across the country and I ask in meetings, how many of you have seen your police department's use of force policy? I've been to Chicago and asked that question, New York and asked that question, LA and asked that question. And the same response is, nobody has. Mm-hmm. And until we get engaged in asking those questions up front, we're going to still be looking at these things in our rearview mirror. I'm long-winded. I apologize.
No, sir. And I am really thrilled by your answer there. You mentioned the use of force policies. We've been getting a lot of emails about a group, and they've kind of used the tagline, 8 can't wait. You educated me that this was the 21st century policing model that came after Ferguson and the Michael Brown shooting, and that you had incorporated, I think, almost all of those changes into the department's policy. That gets to your point about reading the use of force policies and really understanding that. Mr. Chair, I don't know if I can improve on what the sheriff just said here, but I would like to make a motion, and Mr. County Administrator, if you need any further clarification, to have your staff, Mr. County Administrator, work with the sheriff, our other strategic partners, to either expand the scope of discussion under the PSCC if that's appropriate, or to look at some other advisory group that may help our law enforcement partners, but also the rest of us look for creative ideas and review policies. I would not want to get ahead of Sheriff McNeil or anyone else. You're the professionals, but I think we have a community role to be in this discussion, and I'm really hopeful that we can use this as a catalyst. So the motion really for my colleagues is what the sheriff just said, and having our staff kind of explore those options and bring us back some ideas to move forward. That would be my motion.
I have a motion. Is there a second? I got Commissioner Lindley. You're good with seconding that?
Yes, sir.
And I've got Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Jackson, and Commissioner Maddox teed up to speak. So Commissioner Dozier, we'll finish with, let's get the motion knocked out, and then we'll go round. So we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any other discussion on Commissioner Dozier's motion as presented? All right. Is it clear, Vince?
Mr. Chair, I had
Okay.
a question real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
It was, Mr. Sheriff, it was on point to the motion because I was wondering the committee that you're looking for or the review of policy that you're looking for, would that be something that you created internally, given the fact that you're an independent constitutional officer, or would that be something that you would look for us to create, to have a look at your policies? Because whatever comes out of that, whatever comes out of that group, no matter what we think about it, you will have to accept that as your policies, because you are over the sheriff's office. So just wondering logistically if that would be something that you would create or something that we would create.
Well, a good question, Commissioner. Let me put the big caveat in this that is the elephant in the room. There are recommendations. I will not have to act on any of the recommendations that's made by the group. Again, that goes to the constitutional aspects of being sheriff. But it is, I can't imagine circumstances where I'm in the room, we're having discussions with folks about policies, and that I would not be, would be opposed to something, unless it's just egregious and just outside the scope of our, if it puts my officers or my deputies in danger, certainly I wouldn't. But I don't want any group to come in and think that they're going to tell me that because we met, this is what you must do.
Right. Well, I think I would be more comfortable. I like the idea of the policy review group more than even the police review group, simply because I believe the policy review affects the system, whereas a police review really affects what happens currently. So, but the thing I would wonder is, Mr. Sheriff, if you would commit to us or to creating that policy review group within your own office, rather than us creating it for you. I mean, if you want us to make appointees, we can make appointees. I just feel like you as an independent, and you said this is something that you wanted, you could do this from your office and create a group that can review your policies, report straight to you, and hear straight from you. So I just wondering about logistics there. I would feel a little bit more comfortable moving in that way. If we wanted to also expand the duties of the PSC to address some other area, that's fine too. But as far as policy review, I just think that, Mr. Sheriff, if you want to do that, I fully support it, but I think it's something that should come from your office versus ours.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
as the maker of the motion, could I clarify real quick?
Sure. We got a couple
Okay.
other people in line to speak to. Go ahead. Yeah.
I understand. The policy, and I appreciate the Sheriff, your response to Commissioner Maddox's question there. That was one example. I was very general with this, but and intentionally so. I think we should be talking to the state's attorney's office, the public defender's office, the city manager, the Tallahassee Police Department. This is a whole community issue, and it's also not about things exclusively that should be done by our law enforcement. It's about those funding priorities, and can we support their efforts looking at other things, mental health funding or other things like that. Commissioner Maddox, I left it loose because I do see this as a community, as a city county, but we're at the county commission, so I'm starting with county, to explore these options and bring them back to us to support the sheriff's efforts. If we can review the policy with professionals and experts in the field, that's great, but I don't see that as the only issue that a body like this could tackle. And I simply wanted to make the motion to let our staff explore these options with the sheriff and others and bring us back some ideas if they think this would help. I am not asking for a specific policy review at the sheriff's department, but in the end, if that's what they distill is the need, sure, it may end up as you describe. But my motion stands to explore these options in partnership with the sheriff's department and our other law enforcement partners in the community.
All right, I've got Commissioner Lindley, I've got Commissioner Jackson, and then Commissioner Maddox, back to you. So Commissioner Lindley on the motion.
Well, actually, no, it wasn't particularly on the motion, but it is We
You
can go
wanna-
ahead and vote on the
Yeah, I was
motion.
gonna say,
if we
let's
wish
go
to-
ahead and finish the discussion rather than taking it
Okay.
off in a different path, if that's okay. Commissioner Jackson, did you want to speak on the motion, or you had questions for the sheriff?
No, just a comment, so I'll stick to the motion. Go ahead.
If I
Yeah.
could come back after the motion is voted on.
Okay.
Yes, I would prefer that.
Right. Yeah, I'll weigh in real quick. I'm kind of where Nick is, where I'd like to see, I mean, the sheriff clearly, this is he covers the whole county, and he's got the responsibility for this. And if we come in and create an entity and then hand him a list of recommendations, it's his prerogative, as he pointed out, whether or not he wants to do that. I think I'd love to see staff and the sheriff work together, and the sheriff could say, here's what I think I'd like to do. And frankly, I have nothing but the faith in Sheriff McNeely. He's done a spectacular job keeping us safe so far. I don't want to get into, as he put it earlier, into his swim lane, but I'm okay with making recommendations or ideas. I think it's pretty clear in the conversation today. I don't know that we need to have a motion and create an entity from our perspective, if that makes sense. But that's my feeling on it. There's a motion. Anybody else want to address the motion as it stands?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner Maddox?
Yeah, I think, and I'm just trying to understand. So, Commissioner Dozier, your motion is not necessarily to create that entity, but to create something whereby the county government works with all of our law enforcement partners in the city to bring about recommendations for everyone or all of the law enforcement entities that may help deal with these issues that we're having or issues that may come about. Is that where the motion is going?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Dozier.
thank you. These, you know, we all know very well these issues are complicated, are steeped in a lot of history, systemic racism, and it may end up being a law enforcement issue, but it may not be a law enforcement issue in the beginning. It may be education, it may be housing, it may be health. We talk about that all the time, right, Commissioner Maddox?
Mm-hmm.
So, as I said, the sheriff raised a phenomenal point about the policy review and the use of force policy. Even if it's just a matter of a sounding board for our law enforcement partners or a way of ensuring the dialogue is there before an incident happens, that could be beneficial. But where I started this was by saying that the defund the police mantra that we're hearing recently is far more complicated than that. It is about funding priorities. I want a body that's not reviewing the actions of an officer or a deputy after an incident, but looking at how we can work together as a community to address some of these things that may not need a deputy to respond to an issue or may need other funding before to help prevent someone from getting into the system. I'm looking for creative ideas. And this motion is exclusively, and I didn't hear anything in what the sheriff just said, telling us we shouldn't do this. We don't have another commission meeting for a month. My motion is simply to allow our staff to talk to our law enforcement partners and hopefully the city as well, to see if there is a creative way that we could tackle these issues more strategically, support our law enforcement partners, and as the sheriff rightly said, continue to reduce the population in the detention center and help people live their lives. So it's much broader. I don't have the answer, but I'm taking the opportunity to let them explore it and bring us back options.
So,
Okay, I've got Commissioner Maddox and then Commissioner Dozier. Yeah.
So, real quick.
And me too.
Lindley, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, a point. I seconded the motion, and I just wanted to make a statement about that before we move forward. Commissioner Maddox, finish it.
Yeah, let Commissioner Maddox finish. He hasn't yet. Yeah, and then I'll bring you back in. Thanks, Commissioner Maddox.
I'll be quick. I can't support the motion because I believe it's something that we can just give staff the direction to do. Tell staff to work with our sheriff and other partners to bring back to us whatever recommendations may come about for us to act on, that we can actually act on and have some difference in what we're have some effect on what we're trying to improve. So I'm more so in favor of us giving staff that direction, and if they come back to say that the sheriff and our law enforcement office feels like a group like what we're talking about now needs to be established, then so be it. I can support that, but I don't want to jump in front of law enforcement in having this conversation and kind of trying to lead them down the road of creating something like this. So I can't support the motion, but if we're going to give, if I can say, I can ask staff, I can support staff getting direction from us to go have those conversations and bring back a report or action items on anything that we may need to take action on.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Lindley.
Yeah, I seconded the motion, but I was hearing, actually, maybe we hear what we want to hear. I think that's human nature. But I was hearing more what Commissioner Maddox suggests, which is really almost an agenda item that would come back to us, might well say, okay, it's time to expand and create this committee, or expand the existing committee in a broader way. But for now, for our staff and the sheriff's office and others to work together and say, where can we tie things together better in our community? And possibly, as Commissioner Dozier suggested, it is a committee, but I didn't really hear in your motion, Commissioner Dozier, establishing or expanding that committee right now, but rather an exploration by staff to come back to us with some options and some ideas. So I guess I would sort of like to hear Commissioner Maddox make a substitute motion, which I think would maybe pull our goals together.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry,
Chair, make a
Commissioner
substitute
Lindley.
motion that we give staff direction to come back to work with the sheriff and stakeholders to bring us back a report and whatever recommendations they may give us on forming whatever groups we may form to affect change in whatever area they seem to see fit. By way of giving them, law enforcement, the leadership role in this, and us just being a partner. That's my motion.
Mr.
All right.
Chair, I'm sorry, that is my motion. I'm not sure why we spent so many minutes going around in circles here. Commissioner Lindley, you just summed it up. I'm just using examples. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm bouncing off what the sheriff said.
Okay, let me
Let's
stop
get
for a minute.
creative. Let's just get a report back and hear more than talking about it right now. That's the motion.
Sheriff McNeil, as
That
the
would
person
be what
who,
I seconded.
Yes,
yeah,
that is
Sheriff
the motion.
McNeil,
Go back.
as the person who will ultimately is driving this, and it's in your area, what would you like to see happen? I heard your preamble early on. I'm kind of curious to hear from you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that we have, I had this conversation with someone before. We are all in the same forest, and we're all looking at the same trees the same way. And what I believe we have to do is to take a step back from the forest we find ourselves in and redefine how we distribute our resources. For example, I don't think I'll throw Chief Abram under the bus here or anything, but I've had the conversation with Chief Abram with respect to why is it that a police officer or a sheriff deputy responds to a person with a mental health problem? It's not a law enforcement problem. Mom calls and says, Johnny's not taking his medication or he overtook his medication. Now, the first responder is law enforcement, and we call EMS as a backup. In some communities, EMS responds to those type calls and law enforcement comes as a backup, particularly in some communities where when the police show up, there's already this angst and I'm going to jail because I've got my mental health issue. What we got to do, I think, is sit down as a group and start to rethink how we use our resources. We overutilize law enforcement. And I think Commissioner Dozier said a moment ago, why did Sheriff, and I would not want to create a mental health pod, but I've got to, because there's no one else doing that. And I'm working with Appalachia. But that's not really all my lane, but it's part of my lane because I've got the detention facility and the people there have the problem. So I've got to try to solve it. And that's the kind of conversation I think we're talking, at least I'm talking about having is, and includes policies and everything else, but a broader discussion about how we deliver services. And we've been doing this. I've said we've been doing the same thing since 1920s in terms of law enforcement. You call, we go, and there's a different way of doing that, at least from my perspective.
All right, so let me reframe my question, which is how can we help you? How about that? You've heard the motion.
I think the creation of a group of people who understand public service, all the various entities of it, and to make sure that we now have the right resources going to the right place under the right circumstances. A committee looking at that and trying to come up with ideas that are different out of the box. And I suspect, obviously, this gets back to defunding the police. There are some funding issues that would be associated with all of that.
Right.
So, all right, so we have a motion, and I agree, Commissioner Dozier. I think yours and Commissioner Maddox were running parallel. They're not too far apart. Anybody else? I'm okay with what the sheriff's suggesting. My only nuance would be there's no let's establish a committee. It's staff's going to sit down with the sheriff and come back with a plan. Do we take public safety, whatever the PSC committee is, and expand that, or what are the other things? And let's have a discussion with the sheriff's input and possibly TPD. I'm fine with all that. My feeling is I don't want to walk out of here and say we've established a committee, because unlike the city, the chief doesn't report straight to us, and the sheriff has latitude to do as he sees fit. So it's a collaborative effort together, and he'll ultimately have the ability to say I like that or I don't like that. But I'm okay with that if that's acceptable to the body. Is that similar to Commissioner Dozier and Maddox? I don't want to keep going back to this, but
Mr. Chair, that is exactly what my goal was up front, and what I originally said was it might be expanding the PSCC, it might be something else. I believe the sheriff's actually the one who first mentioned a group of experts, of professionals in this field. There's a lot of ideas, and once again, I think the sheriff eloquently summed it up a moment ago far better than I did, and that was exactly why I was asking for an agenda item so we could unpack these issues. So once again, I'll just say what the sheriff said, that's my motion, and this is just exploring ideas and bringing them back so that we can get some creative approaches and stop doing things, as you rightly said, Sheriff, the same way we've been doing them since the 20s. With I think the understanding, which goes without saying, that this ultimately would be the sheriff's committee we're helping effectively. Does that make sense? In other words, we can't. Everything, Mr. Chair, in my motion, everything's on the table.
Right.
I don't think we should need to have any specifics like that. That's the point. Let's let them bring us back ideas and let them know how we can support our law enforcement partners the best.
Perfect. Any other discussion on this motion? I've got Commissioner Lindley and Jackson and Maddox who have their hands up, but I'm not sure if that's on this motion or further questions.
Well, not on this
Lindley?
motion. Not on this motion.
All right, so we have a motion. I think we've wordsmithed it to death. Are you guys good, Vince, with where we are with this? All right, all in favor of the motion as it's been presented multiple times, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Perfect. Okay, Sheriff, you're not off the hot seat yet. I apologize. Commissioner Lindley, followed by Commissioner Jackson. Commissioner Lindley, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Sheriff, it was good to talk to you a few days ago too. And you spoke to two sides. I think the other side of the coin, we've talked about mental health for citizens who have encounters with law enforcement. But you discussed a couple of pieces regarding training of officers in conducting interviews rather than making arrest. I mean, I guess it speaks to the manner of that immediate response when a situation comes up. The second thing you talked about was evaluating officers over the years that for mental health, emotional, behavioral effects that are problems that might affect their attitude and behavior on the job. And you said that right now when you're hiring people, they do have evaluations of this sort, behavioral and mental health and all kinds of sort of soft skills that turn out to be, life and death skills sometimes. So what are you doing now in terms of one, training officers in conducting interviews instead of making arrests. I'm not quite sure what kind of interviews, what that means. And two, evaluating officers over the years after they too have faced traumas or have encountered different things. So are those two skills, are they being addressed now? Conducting interviews instead of making arrests, or evaluating officers over the years to see where they are now in their career in terms of their mental stability, their emotional, behavioral needs. We talked about those, and I didn't know if that's something you want to reallocate funds to. If you're doing now, you don't do enough of it or more of it, or so those are two questions on the flip side regarding the officers themselves, your deputies.
Yes, Commissioner, thank you. We are, to answer your two questions, the answer is yes to both questions, that we are focused. Now, the issue is how much do we get and how much training can we get into a year for each one of our deputies to make sure they have the proficiency, the understanding, and the means of having conversations that, and I'll just use the word here, that de-escalation training is what we're focused on right now, and trying to make sure that in circumstances where our deputies go to scenes, the one thing I always say is that the only professional showing up at a scene is us. We're professionals. The other persons are having emotional issues and acting emotionally. The expectation that we're the professionals, we get there, then the communication skills that our deputies have, and I can tell you our deputies are second to none, and I get those attaboys every day from citizens out there saying, they watched our deputy and how he or she was able to calm that person down, talk them down out of circumstance. That's the de-escalation training that we provide. We got to do more of that. We got to make sure that not only comes once a year per se, that we do that maybe 2-3 times a year. So we're very sharp on it. Everybody doesn't get it. Everybody doesn't learn at the same level and doesn't pick training up at the same levels and same capacity. So we've got to do it better. As it relates to the first question, in terms of psychological issues, obviously when they come in the door, we do a battery of questions. We had about 300 question exam that they take that's done by a psychologist that is trained. And the thing I want to do though, Commissioner, is, and we're working on this, my focus here is to take care of my deputies, take care of my employees, and to make sure that the trauma that they get out there in the field, that they aren't carrying that trauma on without it being at least an opportunity for them to sit down with a professional counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, and talk about those traumatic situations. I'm going to digress here a minute, but it's no secret that we have a high divorce rate in law enforcement. We have family issues in law enforcement. That has largely to do with the fact that we're out there every day engaged in some horrific situations that we see. And so I want to build a system, behavioral science unit in I'm calling it that, it can be called something else, but to deal with the issues I believe that is going to help our deputies and our officers in corrections be stronger people, and we can help them and their families. And that's what we got the chaplain program also engaged in trying to help. But we aren't doing enough right now. We're doing the minimum, but we've got to do a lot more.
Well, when we talk about reallocating dollars, I'm hearing you say we need to allocate more to this, to the behavioral sciences, to make sure our officers are stable, well-adjusted, have the skills, and in terms of the emotional support they need. But so reallocating indicates you put more there. What do you take away? What are areas, and this is probably something to be addressed during your budget talk, but what are the areas, if we're reallocating more to this, what are we doing now that we could do less, or we should do less of, spend less on? So that's, maybe not a question immediately for you to answer, but I think reallocating inherently says more of this and less of that. So,
well, unfortunately, Commissioner, in this environment, the environment that I kind of inherited, it's difficult to decide not to do something. I don't think you want to unpack all my
Well, I did hear
grievances.
you say less of your time going to mental health issues, mental health
Oh,
cases.
yes.
I mean, maybe there's a measure of that.
If there was a way of which the county or city or somebody could build a mental health facility that would interdict on the front end, so those persons don't come to our detention facility, that'd be fantastic. I mean, now, and
Well, I mean,
that's
and
what
that
I'm
might be
getting at.
something that comes up in this discussion that Commissioner Dozier initiated too. I mean, because
Well,
we won't be able to just forever say, okay, let's just put another few million on this and add two. I mean, I don't think you're not asking that either, but so where is the balance? What is the part of allocating?
well,
So, I mean, that
and that's
sounds
the
like
catch.
a part.
That's the catch-22, Commissioner, is that in the environment you're currently in, where we've got the population down to 858 today, but as soon as we start the COVID sanctions start to move away, we will. And I talked to Jack about this. He's sitting there with 200 people that he's ready to put in my detention facility. So I, on the one hand, I'm saying that 40% of that shouldn't be there, but that 40% is coming anyway. And so you're gonna have to spend those dollars. But if you can somehow get some work started now, and 2 years, 3 years down the road, you can start reaping some benefits of perhaps not having to fund a detention facility for 1,200 inmates. Maybe you can start funding it for 800 inmates. But right now, you're in a kind of a catch-22.
I understand that. I mean, and it's kind of hard to make big decisions right in the moment of emergency, which is where we are now. So I
Right.
think, I think there's a lot of long-term thoughtful discussions to have on this, but I just wanted to emphasize, I think that the behavior and the training of officers, you've said we need to pay more attention on that side, because when horrible instances occur out on the streets, as they have all over the country in the last, for ongoing reasons forever, it's the officers that get the blame for misbehaving as much as the so-called perpetrator. So it's a balance. I mean, I think it's a balance that we can't ignore and just say there's a few bad apples.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner Lindley. I've got Commissioner Jackson. Commissioner Jackson, it's all yours.
Hey, Mr. Sheriff, thanks for your report and thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome, sir.
We've been on for quite a while, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. Mine are not so much questions. Feel free to comment if you'd like. The work that you did when the COVID-19 cases popped up in the detention facility was nothing short of incredible to slow the spread as quickly as you did after only one positive case. I understand that you guys went through some really proactive efforts to make sure that would not occur. And to date, it's my understanding that you've had very few cases reported at the detention facility. And with 858 folks walking around there every single day, I think that is very applaudable. You mentioned something, and I want to reiterate it. Commissioner Proctor and I share 32304 and the families and young people in 32304 and 32310, and we are very familiar with the economic issues as they relate to poverty, to mental illness or untreated mental illness, addiction issues, and having 1 in every 2 children that comes from a family or a home that is in poverty. The work that I have seen subsequent to meeting with you and several of our community groups, we've had, you and I have attended several, but we've had a total of 7 neighborhood safety meetings, and the visible presence, but in a way that is proactive and is not always sirens blaring and lights spinning, has made a significant dent and a significant difference in the issues that we had seen previously. I don't know that sometimes I don't know if it's just that kids behave when they know I'm watching and then they're getting away with things. But I certainly appreciate the effort that you and your deputies have engaged in District 2 as well as I'm sure countywide. And you talked a little bit about the number of domestic violence cases, and I wanted to kind of really highlight that for the board, that in the period from March 16th to May 29th, that the domestic cases and number of arrests of juveniles was 7 times greater during that time when children weren't in school and weren't occupied and may have been under lower supervision. And I think that your explanation was that you too have handled adult domestic cases on a much higher level during this stressful time. And to think that the adults are dealing with it is something that certainly I think concerns all of us. But to think of these are students that are somewhere between 4 years old and 15 or 16 years old, and having 7 times the number of cases in just a 9-week period from the previous 3 9-week periods is alarming to me for young people. And I think it demonstrates even more the stress that we're experiencing as a community related to COVID, and additionally the other mitigating factors that affect those behaviors. I can't thank you enough for your proactive policing efforts that I've seen personally in my community. 7 neighborhood safety meetings and 4 new neighborhood crime watch programs. I think that you deserve kudos for responding to my concerns, to our community concerns, not only in those zip codes I mentioned, but Leon County wide. And your work and your command staff's work is something that I can truly appreciate from kind of a ground level. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Commissioner.
Appreciate that.
Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. A lot has already been said. I'm going to try not to repeat any of it. But Sheriff, I just wanted to thank you and your entire team for all the work you're doing. I don't think the community talks about your efforts on mitigating the spread of COVID often enough. But that was an incredible effort that really, I think, has saved lives. So thank you for that, as well as your reentry programs. I mean, everything you're doing, sir, is really keeping people safe. So thank you for everything you're doing. I really appreciate it. Leon County is fortunate to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Minor. I'll wind up real quick, Sheriff, with a couple of comments. Let me echo most of the commissioners. Thank you for the job you're doing, keeping us safe, especially in these trying times. I think it's worth noting, it came up earlier, how many people do you house in your correctional facility now? Average, what's the average?
858, I believe it is.
All right, so 850. And your budget for the jail or the correctional facility as it is today, rough numbers?
It's about 50% of our total allocation.
Half
So it's
of,
about
it's half
40.
Yeah,
45,000.
half of your budget, pretty much, right? Yeah, 35 million. Yeah, so yeah, so $35 million are spent in Leon County to house, clothe, feed, and medicate the people at the Correctional Institute, and that's in your stead. And I want to thank you for the reasons Commissioner Jackson pointed out, because it is a big problem in our country today with jails being used as holding cells for the mentally ill and for people that really homeless. It has become a holding place, really, and societally we need to make some changes. So with that, I will just say thank you for the job you do and continue to do, and I appreciate you taking the time to come out and visit with us today. Any other questions for the Sheriff before we let him take off and do his job? All right, Sheriff McNeil, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Take care, Commissioners. Thank you.
All right, so we've done protests. Next up is pandemic. We have Claudia.
Thank you. I'll take it, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Commissioners, good afternoon, everyone. As we've done since the very beginning of the pandemic, at this time I'd like to share just a brief update with you, Commissioners, on our latest efforts related to COVID-19. Like the previous updates I've provided to you, Commissioners, at these meetings, you've also been getting daily reports from me on the full scope of our efforts. So this update will be brief. There's also a separate item, as I'm sure you've seen, an add-on item that discusses funding that the county is eligible to receive under the CARES Act. We'll discuss that in just a little bit. And of course, as always, We're fortunate to have Health Department Director Claudia Blackburn with us, and of course she will be available to answer any questions you might have as well, Commissioners. But first, as you know from our daily updates, Commissioners, we continue to be actively involved in the response efforts at this time. While we've started the implementation of phase 2 of our reopening plan, which I'll talk about more in just a moment, our primary focus continues to be protecting the health and safety of our citizens, which means that we're still actively working to mitigate the spread of the virus by increasing our testing capacity, distribution of PPE, and coordinating with our business community to ensure that our local economy reopens safely as well. As of today, Commissioners, there have been about 80,000 confirmed cases in Florida. As I've mentioned during last week's special meeting, the number of new cases statewide has been increasing over the past several days, which is due in large part to the reopening of the state, as well as the significant increase in testing over the last month. However, the statewide test positivity rate for the last month has been around 4%, which is still below the 6% rate when the state began reopening in April. In Leon County, our numbers continue to be relatively low. On average, we have approximately 4 new cases per day since the beginning of June. That's compared to 6 new cases per day in May. And our test positivity rate is 2.3% since the beginning of the pandemic, which is well below the state average. At this time, we continue to have adequate hospital capacity with enough space and ventilators to meet any potential surge. And of course, as I've previously reported to you, we do have hospital surge plans in place, of course, in case we need them. Commissioners, at last week's special meeting, I presented to you an overview of the county's plan for reopening phase 2. This includes the reopening of our library facilities at 50%, in addition to curbside services, which we will continue to provide, reopening the county's dog parks, and resuming in-person operations in many of our offices. Also in phase 2 under the state's plan, businesses like retail stores, gyms, fitness centers, they can all operate at full capacity with adequate physical distancing and protective measures in place. And of course, bars, pubs, entertainment, businesses like movie theaters and bowling alleys can reopen at 50%. Looking forward to phase 3, Commissioners, our community will begin what we refer to as more in line with a new normal phase. In general, businesses and county services may be able to resume normal operations during phase 3 with adjustments as needed to continue protecting the most vulnerable citizens. Also, as the board discussed during last week's special meeting, ball fields and playgrounds may be able to reopen in phase 3 as well. As you know from our previous updates, Commissioners, all of this will be implemented consistent with the governor's future executive orders. So in terms of timing, it may be weeks or months before we advance to phase 3, depending on when the state meets the gating criteria as determined by the governor. Finally, Commissioners, I regret to report that despite all of our best efforts, we were not able to delay this year's hurricane season, which started on June 1. All joking aside, in addition to responding to the pandemic, we've also been preparing for an active hurricane season and working closely with our partners at the Department of Emergency Management to update our sheltering plans. Should we be impacted by hurricane this year, we are updating plans to identify non-congregate sheltering locations, such as hotels, to minimize the risk of COVID-19 in a shelter setting. And next on the agenda, Commissioners, and of course I'll pause if you have any questions on that, but just as sort of a segue, you'll be hearing from Kevin Peters, who will talk more about all of our preparations for hurricane season, again with a special emphasis on our COVID planning. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy to pause and answer any question that you may have.
Okay, I've got welcome Kevin. I've got Commissioner Dozier in the queue. Commissioner Dozier.
Mr. Chair, we can move on with Kevin's update. I have had one question about the testing. At our last meeting last week, I believe Claudia mentioned that the testing numbers were down at Bragg and others, basis what our capacity was. we hear that numbers are going up across the state and other states because testing is increasing. Those two things don't really square for me. And Mr. County Administrator, we could unpack it now if you or Claudia had additional information, but I would just like to understand that a little bit better. If we could get more information in an update or an email from one of you, that would be sufficient. But again, if you had any comments right now, I wanted to give you that opportunity too. It's just, it's something really challenging that we're all hearing in the news right now, and I wanted to understand it better.
Sure, no, it's great. We appreciate the opportunity maybe to provide some clarification on that, and other folks may have similar questions. Before I even attempt to do that, let me pause and invite Claudia, because I know she's more capable of providing that answer. So Claudia, there she is.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Yes, the testing, the concern we had was that the numbers were dropping. Part of that was because of the weather. And looking now, for the month of June, and that's not just Bragg, it's all the testing in the community, we have already tested 2.11% of the population. So our goal for the month was 2%. In the month of May, we hit 4.5%. So overall, we have tested 7.6% of the population. So our testing is still, it may not be as high at Bragg as it was on certain days, but it's still pretty consistently where we're aiming for that 200 a day. And Bragg will continue. I just want to say it will be closed on Sundays beginning this Sunday, but otherwise it will be open. We'll continue to test at Bragg.
Mr. Chair, that very helpful, Claudia. Thank you. And I did see the note, Mr. County Administrator, in your update yesterday about closing Bragg on Sunday. And I want to echo your comments in that update. The folks there, Claudia, have been, and I know from Bond, Dr. Robinson, others, they've been working 24 or 7 days a week. And it's hot and it's difficult work in all of their gear. They are professional, they're efficient. We can't, say enough good things about them. And I am all for taking a day off. So if that works for you all, I really support that. And I'm glad that your folks will get a day off. But you have answered the question. So thank you, ma'am.
Great, thank you. So I guess Claudia will be in the wings and go to Kevin. Okay, Kevin, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and commissioners. We've been here, also a little busy, activated nearly 100 days. It's been the first time that our EOC and our emergency management partners have been activated on the start date of hurricane season. Very unusual for us. As the county administrator mentioned, we've been planning for hurricane season since March with our partners at the Department of Health, State Emergency Operations Center, as well as FEMA on how sheltering may look this hurricane season, as well as how we're going to handle our internal emergency operations center processes. I think you all know it becomes quite a crowded place during hurricanes, and that's certainly not the way we can operate this year. That being said, hurricane response will look a little different this hurricane season, but it's just as important as ever. That's the last 3 months of activation and our 213 lessons learned from our previous hurricane seasons have us ready for whatever hurricane season will bring this year. The way we've coordinated through COVID-19 and the way we continue to make ourselves ready for hurricane season is a testament to the extensive after-action reports the county has put together over the last 3 years. So this hurricane season, we'll need more than just water, food, and our important papers and our disaster buckets. It's going to require masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, and soap. Those are the things that we'll need to be prepared for hurricane season. As we look at hurricane season, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the National Hurricane Center's parent organization, has an outlook for 13 to 19 named storms. 6 to 10 of those could become hurricanes, and of those, 3 to 6 may be major hurricanes, which would be category 3s or more. As a point of reference, the normal hurricane season is 12 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 3 majors. There's a 60% chance that we'll see an above average hurricane season this year, 30% chance near normal, and 10% chance for a below normal season. We're seeing this because we'll have either neutral or a weak La Nina in the Pacific Ocean. So there may not be any atmospheric influence to deflect hurricanes or impede their development this season. And we are in another strange, not just being activated on the first day of hurricane season, we've also broken some hurricane season records. We had our earliest third named storm of the season, our C storm, Cristobal, this year, formed on June 1st. That's the earliest we've ever had 3 named storms going into a hurricane season. While that's great information with all the numbers, it still doesn't tell us about what may happen here necessarily in the Big Bend area. So we've got to be prepared for whatever happens with hurricane season. I'd just like to remind everyone that the peak of hurricane season occurs around September 10th. We see most of the activity between August and October during hurricane season. We do have a few months to continue to prepare. Not that we can't see anything earlier in the hurricane season, but we tend to see the most active time starting in August. A majority of our most famous and memorable storms, such as Faye, Hermine, Irma, Michael, Opal, Dora back in 1964, those were all August, September, October. During our COVID activation, it's given us a chance to brush up on our hurricane response skills, believe it or not. We've conducted over 230 conference calls with our partner organizations. This includes over 4,000 participants. We've had a chance to practice our emergency logistics distribution process with the over 600,000 items of PPE we've distributed. It's given us the opportunity to work with facilities management to brush up on our warehousing and logistics distribution process, which, as we know, is very important following hurricanes with our water and ice distribution for the community. To complicate things a little bit, we had a tornado on April 23rd across northern Leon County. It was an EF1 tornado with estimated winds near 95 miles an hour. Unfortunately, we saw 47 homes that were affected in some way, but the silver lining was it was a chance for us to go through our damage assessment process, practice that, brush up on the technology to make sure we're ready to do that should it be needed this hurricane season. Recently, with the activity the sheriff was talking earlier about, some of the protest activity, we were able to host the Unified Law Enforcement Command in the Emergency Operations Center. While they coordinated the safety aspects for the protesters, it also gave us a chance to practice our social distance setup of the EOC, all the rearrangement of the tables to provide the 6-foot spacing and removing of the excess chairs to keep people that 6 foot apart to work safely in the EOC. It's given us that chance to test that and make sure that that layout is going to work sufficiently. With respect to sheltering, we continue to coordinate with the Leon County Schools on the utilization of schools as emergency shelters. Typically, we plan for 20 square foot per person during a hurricane. This year, we're planning for 70 square foot a person, and that's 3.5 times the space that we normally have in our hurricane shelters. Now, what that does mean, we'll have to open more schools if we do get into a sheltering environment. But we want to make sure everybody knows we do have the sufficient supply of PPE for all of the staff that would work a shelter as well as shelterees. Additionally, we are coordinating with our health department staff and the State Division of Emergency Management and the Federal Emergency Management Agency on plans for utilization of hotels for non-congregate sheltering for the most vulnerable citizens here in Leon County. It's also being planned for statewide. That's an ongoing initiative we are engaged with the State's Division of Emergency Management. And again, okay, I hit that point. We are working on our staffing plan, reducing the number of staff in the Emergency Operations Center. We're going to have about half the staff to facilitate that 6-foot spacing to make sure all of our staff stays safe while we take activities to keep our community safe.
Thank you, Kevin. All in one breath. That was pretty impressive. Commissioner Dozier, you're up.
Kevin, just what you summed up as the last nearly 100 days and saying that you had time to practice for hurricane season during the last 3 months, That is a remarkable statement, and just, I think, speaks to the professionalism of you and your team and all of our partners, that you would see this as a time to further prepare and not just respond to one crisis before we get to potentially, more storms. So thank you. I think you just answered the question that I had going into this. The hotels for non-congregant, did I hear you say they were for the most vulnerable? I'm thinking about those who are elderly, or those who are disabled. We've talked about those issues with shelters in the past. So is that the population you're focused on with the hotels?
Yes, like the CDC guidance states, the elderly, the over 65 population, those with pre-existing special needs, as well as those that may have been currently diagnosed as COVID positive or and awaiting a test. They may still be awaiting a test when we get into a hurricane situation. That's the desire or the intent for the non-congregate sheltering. Yes, ma'am.
That's fantastic, and planning ahead with that is exceptional. And I assume you're working with the Carney Center and others as well. I know that they're still in social distancing mode for residents who would have been at the Carney Center at the homeless shelter, but that's going to fold into your plans as well if we need to house more people who may be in need of a shelter. Is that correct?
Yes, and we'll work closely with Shington Lammy, he's leading our task force on that. We're working closely with Shington on that process and engaged weekly with him.
Thank you. And I, as someone who serves on the Appalachia Regional Planning Council with our neighbors who are still almost 2 years later recovering from Hurricane Michael, I know they appreciate the coordination we have as a region from your office, through Volunteer Leon and everything. So thank you for that as well.
Great. Kevin, any other commissioners for Kevin? Kevin, thank you. I know in light of what's gone on for the last 90 or 120 days, you've been on hit parade nonstop, and now to layer on top of it the hurricane season, but we're confident you can get us through it. So thank you for your time and appreciate you joining us today. So. Yes, sir. All right, commissioners, we've done protests, we've done pandemic, we've done hurricanes. It's time to get to the preparedness. We've got the consent agenda. By my notes, nobody has pulled any items. I'd entertain a motion for consent. I see
Move consent.
I have a motion by Commissioner Lindley and a second by Commissioner Maddox. Any other discussion on consent? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition on consent? Okay, motion carries. Citizens to be heard. We got everybody. Let me just make the standard statement of we are doing the best we can as far as soliciting public input. We ask for written input by email. I know most of y'all, like me, are meeting with citizens that have taken text. I'll meet outside, socially distant, if there are issues that people have, and most of our offices have, voicemail, and we respond as fast as we can. So, I mean, in light of what's going on, I think we're doing a pretty reasonable job, all things considered. With that, Mr. Administrator, I would turn it over to you for general business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, the first item on general business, item 10, seeks the board's approval to rename the Leon County Health Department Dental Clinic in honor of former dental director, Dr. Edward Zabart. This request is consistent with the county's naming policy, and the justification is included in this item. Just an editorial comment, Commissioners. I think anyone who ever worked with the late Dr. Zabart would agree that he was a driving force behind the clinic and a fierce advocate for the availability of dental care to those most in need in our community. And so your recommendations are before you for options 1 and 2. We have no speakers on this item. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner.
Staff recommendation.
All right,
Second.
Commissioner Minor moves, Commissioner Dozier seconded. Certainly a very appropriate recognition for a job well done. Any other
I know Claudia is very happy. He's on the phone right now.
Good.
Call as well.
Good. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, next up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, item number 11, you'll recall that this item was requested by the board at the May 12th meeting. It is options that the board may wish to consider to adjust county commissioner board meetings and public hearings. At that time, some commissioners discussed an interest in considering commission meetings earlier in the day, as many commissions do. As presented in the analysis, and as I've emphasized in your individual commission briefings, meeting times and dates are not prescriptive by and large, and are purely the prerogative of the board. That's why you see such varied meeting times and frequencies in the analysis before you. Only in the case of a narrow category of public hearings are times prescribed by state statutes. And even in some cases, those can be waived by the commission to correspond with your meeting schedules. Since the board did not seem interested in changing your public hearing times, all the options that are before you, keep those at 6 p.m., again, subject to board direction. And again, the options before you are not in any way exhaustive. They are certainly there are certainly other time and frequency alternatives and combinations that the board that are available to the board should you wish to provide other direction. Again, this is just more of an overview that provides a broad summation of the alternatives available to you. And with that, I don't believe we did not have any speaker cards on this item or comments, rather, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
I've got Commissioner Proctor followed by Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Good. Chairman, I want to thank staff for responding to our efforts to review and look at this situation. I think that the COVID meeting experiences and our manner of handling a great variety of issues over the last multiple weeks, it certainly demonstrated that option C is prudent. We have recognized that in the state of Florida, there continues to be a soaring pathway of COVID spread. I talked to Ms. Claudia Blackburn previously to ask what are we going to do with round 2 when we come back to what we're seeing unfolding now. Nevertheless, though we know it's going to be a fortnight before, and I was watching Dr. White House doctor say the other day, it's going to be next year before we really begin to think about it around. It makes sense in that context, commissioners, that we're looking at, and we've been able to do a wonderful job, that we've evolved. Technology has brought us to a point of convenience, and I would like to make the motion for option C. However, the regular meeting being at 3 p.m. For a once per month meeting, with our evening public hearings being on regular pace and schedule, which gives us room for our conventional workshops if we need to have those things. So I would motion for a fourth Tuesday, or even leave it open to commissioners. But I think that our 3 p.m. meeting is, I don't even have, all 3 of my children are absolutely, they've never known us to have a meeting except on Tuesdays, except at 3. And so is it true for the last 3 decades, our community has not known the county commission to meet on Tuesdays around 3 o'clock. I like to see us stay at 3 o'clock. We don't want to seem like we've cut and ducked. I think that in these times, there still needs to be some stability, some norm line that people can identify with. And I think that 3 o'clock gives us the constant status, stability, and there's so much movement, but we need to stay regular at our regular time. So I would offer commissioners for option C, but keeping it at 3 p.m. As we are. And I would welcome your input for, well, for starters, I would say second Tuesdays of the month. And if, there's change for fourth Tuesday, I'm okay.
Okay, we have a motion. I would second that for discussion. I'm just kind of curious where this goes. Commissioner Lindley, you're up next. Commissioner Minor after you. Commissioner Lindley. Oh, I'm sorry, Dozier before Minor, but Commissioner Lindley, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Well, what I was hoping for when I suggested that we take a look at this was just a really thorough evaluation. It was surprising to me how many counties around the state have their main business meetings during the business hours at 9 o'clock, at least once a month. So I was really, so Commissioner Proctor, wasn't sure, you're saying alternative C, but actually not. You're kind of amending it so the regular meetings would not be at 9 a.m. but at 3.
Yes, ma'am.
So I wouldn't be supporting that. I think honestly that the approach that has been taken on Plan D, which is having regular meetings on the second Tuesday at 9 o'clock during the business of the day, and then 2 workshops a month on the 2nd and 4th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, public hearings on the 4th Tuesday at 6. To me, in my almost 8 years here on the board, most of our vigorous discussions with the public take place during the public hearings. Now we do have some issues that come up during regular business meetings that draw somewhat of a crowd, but as this report indicated, we do have so much technology now. We hear from citizens in many ways all the time. It's simply not that people manage to get down to the courthouse, find a place to park, and get in line for most of the business issues that we bring up, most of the general business. I think it's time to sort of modernize and conduct the business of the county during the day and have the public hearings and the workshops, all of which are open to the public. There's no saying that the public can't come attend any of these meetings at any time. More people work at home. There's so much more flexibility in the workplace that just saying come to the courthouse at 3 seems almost irrelevant to me. People can come to the courthouse any time of the day or the evening, and so I would make an alternative motion for Plan D, just 9 o'clock regular meetings the second Tuesday, workshops the second and fourth Tuesday starting at 1, and public hearings the fourth Tuesday at 6.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
Plan D.
Is there a second? Commissioner Proctor, you wanted to address that, or because I've got a couple
Yes,
other people lined up.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to be on this motion, which I've offered, and to say directly rebuttal to Commissioner Lindsay, is that it's been my 24 years of experience here that frequently you put your workshop in front of your meeting. And the county administrator could probably count the number of times in which we have actually adopted measures in workshops, in particular the budget. And when we have our workshops and we flow into our regular meeting, we're then in the posture to immediately adopt what we've done in workshop. We have done that so many times that I mean, you all have experienced it. And in particular, is it true for budget items that workshop precedes and we immediately go into our meeting at 3. Now, if we're going to disjoin this, meet first, workshop later, it requires that even if there's urgency with respect to the dates of meeting statutory dates and deadlines, we're going to have to meet like way out front, then have a workshop. I think that we disadvantage the process. We disadvantage ourselves. We create additional times to come back. And let me also say that as I've gotten older now, I can handle one good briefing, but Commissioner Lindsay is asking me to get 3 briefings on 3 days, and I need to hold all my stuff together, y'all, as tight and right as I can. That's why C keeps me tight and right for that one briefing, and is all I can do to hold it in. So that's what I would say, Commissioner Lindsay. Please, would you give consideration to?
Okay, so Commissioner Lindley's motion dies for lack of a second. We still have Commissioner Proctor's on the table. I think it's Commissioner Dozier and then Commissioner Minor. No, I'm sorry, you took your hand down, Commissioner Dozier. Okay, Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Commissioner Dozier, is that correct? Have you? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank staff for working on this agenda item. I mean, just the comparison chart of all the other commissions in Florida, I mean, that took a lot of time. It's very useful and helpful for us, but thanks to staff for putting it together. I can't support the motion on the table, Commissioner Proctor. I'm inclined to keep things the same as they are, meeting twice a month. And here's the reason why. Certainly meeting once a month would be easier for us. It'd be easier for county staff. I think it'd be harder for citizens to reach out to us and provide input to us on things that are important to them. Take a look at COVID. Take a look at the protests we've seen. The speed with which the news cycle is having new topics come and thrust upon us is so fast these days. I think for us to meet once a month, but providing public input that one time a month where they can talk with us, I don't think is going to be frequent enough for them to communicate with us on topics that might change every 2 weeks. It's surely meeting once a month will be easier for us and staff. I think citizens will look at it as us not giving them as much opportunity to speak with us. And so I'm against the motion. I feel strongly we still need to meet twice a month for our regular meetings. As far as the 9 a.m. versus 3 p.m., that's a tough one. I think it's probably easier for most people that want to come to the courthouse. And this is putting COVID aside for a minute. I believe it's easier from what I've heard around town over the years for people to come to a 3 o'clock meeting in the afternoon than it is to break away from work and come at 9 a.m. That's just purely anecdotal, but I do think it's probably in the citizens' best interest to keep it at 3 p.m. I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say, but I do feel pretty strongly that we need to meet twice a month. It's better for citizens. It gives them more opportunity for us to communicate with us about issues that are very volatile, that change frequently. And I do think that the 3 p.m. meeting time is still the best option. We could probably get more people to show up at 6 p.m., but then you're talking about, some meetings going till 11 p.m., even midnight for the big issues. And I don't think people want that. So I'm inclined to keep it the same way it is, recognizing there's not a perfect solution for everybody. But I think in terms of what's best for the citizens, giving them the most access to county commission meetings and providing them the most opportunity to provide input, I think the current status quo is the best way to go. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Minor. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I largely agree with Commissioner Minor. I could support a motion to table this until September or so and to look at options for 2021 fiscal year calendar. At this time, I'm not inclined to make any other changes, and we only have one more commission meeting before we get to the fall anyhow. So I think it would be good to hear from others. With the options that are on the table, I do have to say I was rather surprised. My gut reaction was going to be that afternoon was probably still the standard around the state. So I was pretty surprised. And Commissioner Lindley, I'm glad you asked the question. You're right. The analysis was fantastic, as it normally is from our staff. So it was fascinating to see that most counties around the state have moved their times to 8 to 10 in the morning or 1 p.m. to 4. I think those were the two blocks that were most popular. Mm-hmm. I'm open to exploring that and hearing from others, but the things that really struck me, one, we only had 15 meetings in 2019. So we're not meeting twice a month anyhow. And there was one example that came to mind when we started in the pandemic, that there was a development that would have been put on hold, impacting jobs and local businesses if we weren't able to meet and approve a certain a plat for that project. There are business impacts if we don't meet as often. in addition to what Commissioner Minor said a moment ago about just new issues that might come up. The second thing that really strikes me is I think Commissioner Proctor is actually right about ratifying issue or workshop items in commission meetings. If that was an issue, I'd love to hear more, Mr. County Administrator. I hadn't thought about that. But if we flip the script like this, and I understand Commissioner Lindley I think it was Commissioner Proctor was focused on, if we had workshops after the commission meeting, it limits the time that we have for discussion. On average, our meetings don't last more than 4 hours, but sometimes they do. And I also agree there isn't a perfect time for everyone, but afternoons and into the evening, if a discussion, and some things don't happen, I keep going back to the COCA example, there are others that aren't public hearings that do happen during regular business meetings, and we have to continue some of those subjects after the public hearing. So I'm kind of concerned about limiting our time to hear from the public. And the last thing that I'll say, my concerns with moving the meeting to a morning time, and this may not be, the most important, but I think it's something we have all valued, and I certainly celebrate as the value of our county family. If we were to move our meetings to the morning, we would not be able to include our new PAGE program, for example. We would not be able to have high schoolers or other students come and join us for meetings. I truly believe that's a value. Even if there's a limited number of kids who participate in our different programs, it is a value. There are parents who bring their kids, Youth Leadership Tallahassee kids come and attend meetings. And I think that, to me, without a better reason to move our meetings to a morning time, it's more flexible for most people, but we get the young people an opportunity to join us and to actually work with us in the new program if we're able to do that in the fall, Mr. County Administrator. So those are just a few thoughts, Mr. Chair. Again, I could support kicking this to August or September if we want to talk about it again, but I'm not ready to make a change at this point. Thank you.
Okay, I'll weigh in real quick. I was also pretty impressed with I didn't expect much to come out of this, but when you look at it, I might, and staff did a really nice job of laying this out. A couple things that are worth bringing up again that have been touched on. Really, the goal here is to have as much public input as we can possibly get in whatever form or fashion. But what's pointed out is that, things have changed. It used to be that you came to the county commission meeting if you had a compliance issue, or if you had any issue that was before. You had a barking dog, you had a road that needed work, you had a park, whatever your issue, the primary way to communicate with us was come to the commission meeting and air your grievance, and that would start the conversation. That so rarely happens today. In fact, I routinely tell constituents, please email me, because I've got your name, I've got the subject as you define it, I've got a way to communicate back to you, and I can forward that on to everybody, and it just changes the way we communicate. So I look at it as saying we're just changing the way we're doing things. I'm going to support the motion. I don't know that it goes through, because I really look at it and say we're not meeting less, we're just meeting a little differently. I'd also like to point out, and I'd ask staff to at least work with us on this, if there have been times in my tenure when I know we have had a meeting because it's scheduled, okay? Not because there really is any imminent need, but because it's scheduled. I also know there have been times where staff has come and said, we are just putting a meeting together to meet the need, and we have decided not to have a meeting. So I'd like staff to be a little bit more open about that and tell us in advance, listen, at the end of this month, there's nothing compelling that forces us to meet. Like most of y'all, my office is open all the time. I talk to people all the time. I think coming to a meeting and addressing us there really is not the primary way people get in touch with us. So I think you've watched things change over the years. And for that, I'm fine with making the change. I agree with Commissioner Proctor, too. I think 3 o'clock has some kind of a ring to it. And frankly, I've been with commissions around the country that meet in the morning and that people complain because they work. I've been with commissions who meet in the evening and they can't get there because they have children, or they can't get, there's, as was pointed out, there's never a perfect time. So anyway, well, that's my rant. Commissioner Dozier, you'd like to weigh back in?
Just two quick things, Mr. Chair. One, clarification. The only motion that's on the table, Commissioner Proctor, doesn't change the time of our meetings. It just decreases the meetings to once per month. Is that correct?
Right. Yes,
Okay.
and but I would add, and I don't want to ask staff on, but in the event that we had something so compelling that we felt a need to meet, it would be not that big of a lift to say, we've got an issue and we need to, because we would have, in the way it's laid out, we'd have workshops on that day anyway. So you've already got time lined up to meet. So we're not, and as you know, the other thing, which I think the general public may not see, is, most of us know the time we spend in these proper meetings is probably 1/100th of the time we spend in this job, because most of us sit on number of authorities, number of other committees, a number of other boards, and then take in the constituent interaction. So anyway, Commissioner Dozier, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that. I'm as busy as any of you all, meeting with others and serving on different boards. We've had this debate for 2 months now. I cannot, I don't care how many different ways people can communicate with us. There is a role for public comment in public meetings, just bottom line. So whether we offer 2 hours or 10 hours for that, there's a role for that. So just from my perspective, I celebrate the fact that people can communicate with us through a variety of different ways, and we don't have to have everything come to the commission like we did 20, 30 years ago, at a commission meeting, that is. The other thing I think that's important is we only meet twice a month. Mr. County Administrator, check me on this. I think 5 to 6 months of the year at the most. October, November, a few months in the spring, but it's not more than half the year that we have 2 meetings per month. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it is far harder to schedule a meeting, a special meeting with staff, with all of us, than it is to cancel a meeting. Would that be fair, Mr. County Administrator? It's easier to cancel a meeting that's already on the books than it is to schedule a special meeting.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. We can facilitate either one of those.
Yes, sir. You're very diplomatic. Thank you, Mr. County Administrator. Let me say, for all of our travel schedules, for everything else, I think it is easier. And Mr. Chair, you were right. Our county administrator is quick to cancel a meeting if there's a conflict or if we don't have agenda items. So again, I don't know what the push is here, but I think it is important for us to recognize that we only have 2 meetings a month at 6 months out of the year at the most. And that is fewer meetings than we had when I started. So we've become more efficient, and I'm not really sure why this change is necessary. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Jackson, and then back to Commissioner Proctor. Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, just one point of clarification, Mr. Administrator. This doesn't preclude us from scheduling any, like the chairman mentioned in his comments, it doesn't preclude us from scheduling anything in particular in relation to, let's use COVID as an example, or any pressing issue that is coming before us, either between meetings or between workshop and the next scheduled meeting. Am I correct?
That's correct. In addition to having that 4th Tuesday available for a meeting, if you like.
So that 4th Tuesday would kind of be an actual meeting day, and then the agenda or the information being to be determined if it's necessary to have that workshop or subsequent public hearing, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's the way
so I would agree with several of the commissioners that have talked about ways of communicating issues. And I fully understand where Commissioner Minor and Commissioner Dozier are coming from as well. But I have seen the uptick actually in public interaction minus, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, I've seen an uptick in public interaction now that there is this platform for them to um, supply comment and to engage in us. I know that in particular, I'm only speaking for one commissioner's office, but I find that probably 80% of the business that is done for constituent concerns within the district occurs via electronically or telephone calls, more oftentimes electronically. So I would support alternative 3, although I do like the sacredness and the involvement of our youth at 3 in the afternoon. So I kind of like the 3 in the afternoon. I think that's very important. And thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Dozier.
All right, I've got Commissioner Minor, and oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Proctor first, then Commissioner Minor. Commissioner Proctor. You need to unmute your line, Commissioner Proctor. I can't hear you, Commissioner Proctor.
He's trying.
Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, there you go.
Commissioners, I think we all could agree that we should really go, if I would be real willing to withdraw this motion, if Commissioner Maddox, if his aide would be willing to cook desserts, 8 times a week, we should have 8 meetings. And Commissioner Maddox, I am willing for us to meet at least 8 times a month. If your aide would fix dessert, we have to come back and do it, bro. I mean, just ain't no doubt about it. She's not gonna do it. He's shaking his head. And I think that Commissioner Jackson makes the point that the number of people watching us in this format, I think, has increased, believe it or not. I don't know why. At my church, the number of people who are participating in church services and Bible study has increased. I don't know why, since we've not been coming into a building. I don't know why. But if we want to extend Commissioner Minor, give the citizens a chance to speak to us, which means instead of 3 minutes, which they have as a maximum allowance, they get to have 6 minutes to talk to us for the run of the month. I think that the email gives them some break to reach us. Everybody got my personal cell phone number. Everybody knows how to reach Rachel and all the rest of us. So I think that for the 3 minutes that they have an opportunity less to talk to us, and we're not talking to nobody now, and it seems like we may not be off this format for a while, I think we should not hesitate to evolve with the time. Second of all, I want to make sure that y'all know that we don't have a staff that we need to babysit. If we had a gang who couldn't shoot straight as a county administrator, we need to come up here and meet, 4 times a week. If we had an attorney who lacked moxie and couldn't get it done, we probably need to come up and meet 7 times a month. But please don't forget, our staff is different from all these other counties. Our county administrator is the president of Florida's administrators. Our former attorney was the president of International Attorneys Association, as well as Florida. Our Commissioner Maddox is not no Rudy Poop commissioner. He's the president of Florida Association of Counties. Our chairman ain't Rudy Poop. He is the national president. We ain't the average kind of commission. Don't y'all get that? So we are not the kind of folk who need to come up here and hold an average staff, and we ain't average commissioners. So when you look at the leadership type here, we get this. We have a tremendous lineup around our table. And in the way in which we are processing our business, if the chairman needs to say, guys, let's come together, I think we need to get together and bump heads on this one, let's hold a meeting on that second Tuesday. We need to come up in the fourth Tuesday, whenever he tells us. And the other thing you look at commissioners, all of y'all work harder, way harder than me. And I'm just gonna tell you, this week I'm meeting with you. The morning I'll meet in front of the governor's office. Friday I'm gonna hold a meeting with Matt Lowe. Saturday I'm gonna be at the fairground giving away food. Sunday I'll be somewhere preaching. And but all of you work way harder than me. So we have excellent commissioners. We have excellent attendance. In spite of the fact of your responsibilities beyond the dais that we share, our attendance is always tight and right. So all of those dynamics, if we was rooted to, hey, let's stay together. But because we have the capacities that we do, I think we can get it one and done. And if needed an extra, I trust the chairman's judgment. I trust our staff's judgment. They are superior, y'all, and we ain't far behind. So that's why I urge you, let us evolve and seize the moment and what it offers and recognize the stupendous talent that we hold, and we're able to keep a wonderful staff in the posture of working. They probably can get more done if they didn't have to see us as regular. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. Commissioner Dozier.
Mr. Chair, I'm saying this more for all of those many, many people who are watching us than for this board. I'm not sure which way this is going to go. I'm sorry, that was a little tongue in cheek. I think it's important to remember that we have done a great job. Actually, it was the board's direction, but the staff has done a great job expanding the ways people can watch our meetings, whether we're in chambers or not. We've added the YouTube channel, we've added Facebook, we've added a lot of different things. Just at our CRTPA meeting yesterday, I referenced this and said we should put CRTPA meetings and others on Facebook Live and YouTube. We do have a lot more options, as you all have been saying. But let's be clear, to cancel a meeting is always going to be easier than having us cancel other things for a special meeting. And the last thing I wanted to say here is I think this is a complicating factor for all of the other boards we work on. City and County Commission sets our schedule, and a lot of the other agencies and boards, or even the boards we serve on, Innovation Park and others, they're looking at our meeting schedules. And I think adding a special meeting is a challenge for others as well. So again, I think we're complicating something and we're conflating issues about how much other work we do, which is great. Constituent issues are always addressed more often, hopefully, outside of a commission meeting. It doesn't mean that a elected board doesn't have a role with our excellent staff. All of the great work that's been done, the fantastic staff that we have, it doesn't mean that we can back up and just leave it to them. This is our job. And I know I'm getting pretty, dug in on this issue, but I really am sensing a trend that we're content to push our chairs back and let things just go. And that is great when things are going well, but it's our responsibility to sit at the table. And this is the only time the seven of us are legally allowed to communicate and make decisions, period, full stop. I respect you all. I want to hear what you think. There's a reason for holding the meetings. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Commissioner Dozier. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair.
No, I was just going to say you're last.
Who's last?
You're the last up to speak.
Okay,
Go
great.
ahead. Yeah.
Let me start by saying I believe all of you are working in good faith. I believe that every single one of you on the county commission are dedicated to serving your constituents. I know that. I've worked with you enough. I see that. So that I'm not raising that as a question whatsoever. But one thing that the county commission I think enjoys is a reputation for being accessible. We listen to people. I hear that all the time from people throughout the community. And yes, there are a lot of ways where people can reach out to us. more than before the COVID crisis. I understand that, and that's a good thing. But the question I ask myself on this motion is, if this were a vote that was provided to the public, would they vote yes? I think the answer is clearly no. If this were a ballot initiative, just theoretically, would they vote to allow a reduction of county commission meetings for them to be able to provide input? I think the answer is a resounding no. We have to think about that in those terms. I mean, one of our greatest obligations is to be accessible to people in as many ways as is easy for them, so that we can hear what the community wants us to do. And yes, there are many ways they can reach out to us, and we have meetings all the time with neighbors outside of the public meetings. But as Commissioner Dozier said, our time to be together and talk legally about important things about this community is very rare. And I think it still needs to remain twice a month. So before you vote, think about, if this were posed to the public, what would their answer be? And I think you got your answer right there very clearly. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
All right, nobody else up to speak. Commissioner Proctor made the motion, which was option 2D or C, with the change for time at 3 o'clock instead of 9 a.m. All in favor of the motion as Commissioner Proctor has presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, all opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
I've got Commissioner Lindley.
I supported the motion.
You supported the motion. Okay, so the motion, and Commissioner Maddox, you supported the motion? Okay, so wow, okay. I didn't see that coming. 5-2 if I see it right. Okay, so the motion carries 5-2. Next up, thank you.
Commissioner Maddox, will your aide treat us, kindly, the desserts?
She will not.
Yeah, that was a motion I would support all day long. Madam Attorney, I think you own the next one. Am I right?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Agenda item number 12 is proposed revisions to board policy number 1-5, rules procedure for meetings of the Leon County Board of County Commissioners. The draft before you for consideration, commissioners, is intended to provide for a simplified parliamentary procedure. Under the current policy, the policy is the framework that the board uses to conduct its parliamentary procedure for its meetings. That would continue to be the case under the proposed draft. One change that is substantive is in section 1 of the draft. It clarifies that the Roberts Rules of Order would be used. It would be guidance. It would not be binding, which would give the board more flexibility in how it conducts its meetings. But again, the board would always be subject to the provisions of its own policy and law. It would make the draft before you also is intended to ensure that the policy is consistent with current board practice. It cleans up some terminology, improves clarity, and that sort of thing. We didn't get to survey all the counties in the state, but we did include in attachment 3 that provided a short summary of how 19 other counties in Florida deal with its parliamentary procedure. As you sure saw, they run the gamut. There's no consistency there, and that again is just an indication that the board has flexibility to do what it wants with its own policy. We did receive one public comment on this agenda item, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board members and the commission may have about the draft before it.
Okay, commissioners, and I just for clarification, this is purely codifying, cleaning up, kind of basically making the way we've been operating a little bit more clear. Am I right? I mean, if you look at, if you get down to it, there have been some areas where we probably were operating outside of the specific Roberts rules, if you take them literally, and this gives us a little bit of latitude.
That's correct. And again, in section 1, it changes the shall comply with Robert's Rules of Order to expressly say that it is guidance,
Right.
and that no action taken by the board that is not in adherence with Robert's Rules of Order would not void or invalidate that board action.
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. And I mean, everybody operates in good faith, but anyway, Commissioner Maddox, you're up.
Move that recommendation of option number 1.
We have a motion, and we
Second the
have,
motion.
and Commissioner Lindley seconded, and Commissioner Jackson gave me the peace sign. So, and Commissioner Dozier, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam County Attorney, I really appreciate the conversation we had about this item, and there were obviously a lot of issues that we needed to clear up in this policy. So I like the plain language, as I told you this afternoon, and I think if we are not bound by Robert's rules to the letter of all of those intricacies, then we should make that clear. I did mention to the county attorney, Mr. Chair, that one thing that stuck out to me was some of the terms that we use. This policy is really the bedrock for how we govern the meetings. And so some of the terms like, I'm scrolling to it, but lay the item on the table or something like that, those were actually new to me. And I think it would help to have a little primer, not a Robert's Rules cheat sheet, but motions and things that we typically use as a document that new commissioners could receive when they come in to the county, just as a guide for us. If there's a lot more on how we frame motions and other things that's not contained in this document and doesn't need to be part of the policy. Madam County Attorney, did I articulate that as we talked about today? Is that right? Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, Commissioner Dozier, you articulated it well. That is something that a little primer that the county attorney's office would be happy to put together in coordination with the county administrator's office. Would be happy to do that.
Okay.
Okay. For the maker of the motion, Commissioner Maddox, I believe that was you. Could you accept that as a friendly amendment to develop a primer that would not be part of policy, but would help all of us and any future commissioners?
That's fine.
Thank you. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'll accept.
Okay. I guess that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other commissioners in queue to speak. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented by Commissioner Maddox, seconded by Commissioner Lindley, I believe, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Commissioner Proctor, are you with us on this?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Madam Attorney. Nice job. Next up.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, item number 13, you will recall, was proposed by the board at the July 9th meeting. This item seeks the board's consideration of a new policy entitled Recruitment of County Administrator and County Attorney, which would require a formal external search to be conducted by the board upon initiating a selection process to fill the county administrator or county attorney's positions. In some, Commissioners, the analysis before you indicates that while it's perfectly within the board's purview to enact such a policy, it is certainly not common due to the fact that these selections processes are all unique and require flexibility depending on the circumstances at the time. But with that, we are happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
All right, I've got Commissioner Maddox.
Move option number 2.
All right, we've got option number 2. I would second that. And I'll weigh in, seeing nobody else. I got a couple of phone calls from people, and when I first read the title, it had been a few months since we'd had this discussion. I thought, really? This is how my year's going to go? The county administrator and the county attorney are going to roll out while I'm chair.
Okay.
Anyway, for the public, we have gone through a couple of searches, not many, in the last years, and I personally feel like we tie the hands of future boards by laying out a plan. I think giving them some flexibility, you could always back it out again, but after having looked at it, I thought to myself, this doesn't make as much sense as maybe it did in the moment. So that's my 2 cents. So I'm going to support Commissioner Maddox's, which is basically let it lie as it is, if I understand the way he made the motion. So Commissioner Dozier, you're up.
Mr. Chair, I actually discussed this one with the county administrator at length, and I tend to agree that we don't need a full-blown policy, perhaps, and to make it difficult to go in a different direction in the future. But if we go back a little over a year, the genesis for this really came because we put one of our stellar county employees, from my perspective, in a really difficult position. Named in an agenda item before the commission had the ability to say which direction do we want to go. And if not a full-blown policy, and Mr. County Administrator, I'd like to hear your thoughts about this, because we talked about this in briefing. I'm wondering if there is a way that we could at least codify that County Administrator, County Attorney will ask the board what our preference is before bringing an agenda item that makes a recommendation for an internal candidate or a national search. Ms. County Administrator, did I summarize that pretty well?
No, you did, absolutely, and that reflected our conversations precisely, and I agreed with you at the time, and I agree with you now in terms of the very first step in a process like that should be an item that brings the board high-level processes and alternatives relative to the process itself, and then details after you've decided based on which process you select. I think if that's the sentiment of the board, if that's the direction you'd like to go, I would need to just think about it a little bit and confer with the county attorney, and we could, again, if that's the direction of the board, I'm sure we could bring something back to kind of memorialize something along those lines.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. County Administrator. I like I said, I do agree we don't need to bind our hands or any future commission, and I also hope we don't have to deal with this during your term as chair or in the next few years for some time to come. But I think that this check-in is appropriate, and if we had done that last spring, it would have helped us all be more clear about our choices in that process. So I'd like to make a substitute motion to ask the county administrator and county attorney to bring us back an option to codify this check-in. Mr. County Administrator, you give me the language here, how I should do, not a policy, but just a process piece that you would bring an item to the board and check in on which direction we want to go before any other steps are taken. Is that correct, Ms. County Administrator?
I can certainly work with that if it's acceptable to the board.
Okay. I've got a motion. Is there a second?
This is just giving, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, this is just giving, it might have gotten a little complicated there. So this is giving county administrator and county attorney a second chance to tell us a different approach to this question, and instead of having it in policy. That's all it is. It's kicking it to a future meeting.
Okay,
so that
we
would be the
have
motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? I think the motion dies for lack of a second. I'll just weigh in and say everything we do is public, and frankly, from a historical perspective, people can look back and say, how did they do it? What was it done? And so I think, some of this I think will be inherent just in the job itself as going forward. But with that,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Go ahead, Commissioner Dozier. Yeah.
I will wrap up my comments here. I was trying to be delicate before. We were not given that option before the agenda was made public last spring. In the agenda item last spring, a phenomenal county employee was named in the agenda item as a recommended county attorney. And that is not the woman sitting with us today. That put everyone in a difficult position. What I am asking for the peace of mind for the board and to preserve the integrity of our incredible internal candidates, is simply a way for the county administrator and county attorney to check in with the board on which direction we want to go before naming a county employee in an agenda item. So no, sir, I disagree. We were not given that chance last year, and it got political and hurt feelings very quickly, and something that has troubled me for over a year. So I may not get a second, but I think for the record, it's important to know exactly why this question is important for us, because it was a bad process. And Mr. County Administrator, I think you have agreed that we could have handled that differently in what you just said, that we could have checked in, you could have checked in with us before naming somebody in an item. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Maddox is up next. Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I don't want to tie the hands of our county administrator nor our county attorney on making recommendations that they feel are legit to succeed them in their position. Yes, we did have a candidate in the fall that the county attorney recommended, and we made a decision about which way we wanted to go on that. That county attorney, I don't know if she took it personal or not, but she's still with us. That's what we know. So I want to keep things the way they are, because I think when you look at it, we have a county administrator who was recommended by the previous county administrator. We have a county attorney that was not, but the process has worked for us. Even if it's placed us in a tough position of having to make a decision on what we wanted to do as a board, the process has still worked. We have two amazing professionals leading our different helms of our county offices, and I have full confidence in both of them. So that's why I made the motion. I don't think the process is broken. I think that if they want to make a recommendation, they should be able to make a recommendation, and we should make decisions based off of that recommendation and what we want for our county and for our board. So I'm comfortable supporting the motion on the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Maddox. Okay, nobody else in queue to speak. The motion is presented by Commissioner Maddox, which I seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposition? Commissioner Dozier? Okay. 6-1, I think, if I follow is Commissioner Proctor, you with us on that?
I'm in there.
Okay. All right. 6-1. Next up. Thank you. Good discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, item number 14 seeks the board approval to award a bid for the construction of the Bradford Volunteer Fire Department, who was the responsive low bidder in this job and on this procurement. And we have no speakers on this item and are recommending option 1.
Commissioners.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Lindley. I got a second by Commissioner Maddox. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion has been presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Dozier, you were with us on that, right?
I was with you.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
yeah, it's hard for me between the voices and the hands. Thank you, yeah.
I was a little late on raising my hand. I didn't want you to think it was a no vote. Thank you.
That's what I was worried about. Thank you. Okay. Next up, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, this item number 15, seeks your authorization to negotiate a development agreement pursuant to Florida statutes and the Land Development Code to include the donation of right-of-way for Bannerman Road widening, as well as the establishment of a regional stormwater facility. This item, importantly, Commissioners, does not approve any development. That process, all of this will follow the typical review and approval process. It simply allows us to contemplate these issues concurrent to that process, the final agreement of which, of course, will be brought back to the board for your consideration, along with 2 required public hearings. There was one comment on this item, which was distributed, posted, and will be made part of the public record. And with that, Commissioners, we are recommending option 1.
Okay, Commissioners. Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great. I just want to say, Commissioners, that this item underscores the point made by former Supreme Court Judge editorial view last week. That there's no doubt it sets up for additional resources to aggregate in the north end of the community. I concur with that. I was just shocked when I read that. I believe it was Saturday, sometimes not too long ago. Justice Anstead. And I would just say, Commissioners, that in the interest of fairness and balance, that is very important for resources which this portends to align with future development and expansion of Bannerman Road and all of that, that the train is moved out and we are seeing so many resources go north. And Commissioners, I'm still begging on you all to note that the fairground is a little project that could well be a destination site. It still has no 21st century indoor plumbing anywhere. I will be hosting a farm share giveaway for upward of 3,000 people on Saturday. And I imagine that in the lineup for the drive-up food, somebody may have to go to the bathroom. They're going to have to go outdoors. But I just feel like I'm being left out, and I feel like you're not focusing on balanced growth and the balancing for opportunity. Not asking for a whole widening of Bannerman Road from Thomasville down to Meridian. Just asking for a facility where we can have meeting space, community space, and some bathrooms that's inside. I'm asking y'all to, every time I see stuff like this, I see what I don't have, but I see what the McCoys and all the bigs can get. And I mean, I hope that it doesn't take a riot for Tallahassee to think about all the underlying issues which point to what Justice Anstead, of all people, pointed to in his article, that there is a disparate difference of resources that we tend to be easing away of taking care of all sides of town. And those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Minor, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of my constituents was the one that provided input on this item. And it's been a longstanding question among folks within Friends of Lake Jackson about for stormwater facilities, building it, testing it, getting it certified before development starts, before other development starts. And I know what their intent is. Their intent is to make sure that the stormwater facilities are doing their job as designed, and that the water quality is left intact. The county administrator and I have talked about this in the past. I know what that goal is. I think we all have, I certainly have that goal. I know we all have that goal, which is to make sure that our stormwater facilities are functional, that they're doing the job as intended. But Mr. County Administrator, would you mind kind of addressing that point? It's basically the discussion you and I had before about basically the county process is such that we have a good amount of degree of assurance that the facility is going to be designed as and built and as effective as intended.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Minor, happy to do so. It's typically the way that projects are done now in terms of the work that's done ahead of time on the stormwater facilities. And as you mentioned, we will be codifying this in the EMA. But I don't see that there's any reason that we can't have this development agreement come back and reflect that currently. So we would be happy to do that and incorporate that into this development agreement. if there are any issues that arise related to that, legal or otherwise, we will, of course, bring that back to the board, but I don't see why we can't do that. And in this particular development agreement, we'd be happy to do so.
Okay. Yeah, because, I mean, again, we will all want the stormwater facilities to work. You may be able to ensure that. I mean, a lot of the designs of this are not rocket science. I mean, the industry has evolved to the point where you kind of know what you're going to do and you know what you're going to get at the other end. So there may not be a case in every project where you need to hold up development, everything related to the stormwater facility until that facility's been certified, correct? And so long as we can assure it on the county side and our staff side that we're achieving the same end goal, which is that the water quality is going to be, adequate for us, then I think we're in good shape.
So Commissioner Minor, is that in the form of a motion with that preamble as far as adding to because there's not a motion on the floor to accept the.
Yes, so moved with the addition that the county administrator had outlined.
And I think that's a good comment. I would second that. I don't see anybody else up. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, all in favor of the item as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Commissioner Proctor?
Mr. Chairman, I support jobs that hire men that work in my district. And this project would likely hire men who work in my district, and I support their jobs. I support this measure.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Next up, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, item number 16 seeks your consideration of appointments of citizens to advisory committees, those which include the Committee on Quality Growth, the Architectural Review Board, the Board of Adjustment Appeals, Kennedy Roads Committee, and Career Source, the Capital Region Board, in addition to the Planning Commission. All of the eligible applicants to the various appointments are reflected in options 1 through 8. And Mr. Chairman, I could walk you through that if that would be helpful.
Let me ask a logistics question. Should we do this one at a time? Because I think they're different enough where you can't do something wholesale. So, all right, you have the material in front of you. Option number 1, which is appoint 3 nominated eligible applicants to the advisory committee for quality growth for 3-year terms and ending May 31st of 2023 as follows. Appoint Bill Kimbrell to seat number 1, Jackie Wilson to seat number 3, and Antonio Jefferson to seat number 13.
Chairman, I move the slate.
I got a motion by Commissioner Proctor, second by Commissioner Maddox. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Hey, Commissioner Dozier, I'm so sorry. Were you waiting to speak on there, or were you just?
I was going to make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. My apologies, but people jumped in. Option number 2, appoint 1 citizen to seat number 9 on the advisory committee for quality growth for a 3-year term ending May the 31st of 2023. Of the eligible applicants, do we have a nomination? Commissioners, the applicants are Jabari Allen, Robert Campbell, Barbara Clark, Raphael Merriman, Latifa Muhammad, and Claynisha Stevens.
I'd nominate Latifa Muhammad.
All right,
Second.
we have a nomination. Okay, and I would second that. Latifa Muhammad has been nominated to be the citizen on the advisory committee for quality growth. Are there any other nominations, any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Option number 3, reappoint 1 eligible applicant, Leslie Jacobs, to the Architectural Review Board for a 3-year term ending June the 30th of 2023.
Option 3.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jackson and a second by Commissioner Dozier. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Option number 4, reappoint 2 eligible applicants, Paul Petronas and Darrell Williams, to the Board of Adjustments and Appeal for 3-year terms ending June the 30th of 2023.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Lindley, a second by Commissioner Dozier. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Okay, option number 5, appoint one citizen to the Canopy Road Citizen Committee, the remainder of the unexpired term ending October the 31st of 2022. The eligible applicants are Curtis Chapman, Charles Crooks, and Marianne Coos. Do I have a nominee?
I nominate Marianne Coos.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Dozier for Marianne Coos. Is that just preference for name recognition there?
Yes, that's all it is. She's been on the board off and on. She's terrific on
Okay,
in these.
and has a
These
name that
matters.
works. Okay.
Mhm.
We
And
have
a good name.
we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Option 6, appoint 2 nominated and recommended citizens to the Career Source Capital Region Board as follows. Reappoint Rebecca Kelly Manders for a 3-year term ending June the 30th of 2023, and appoint Lisa Blazer for the remainder of the unexpired term ending June 30th of 2021.
Move option 6.
Motion by Commissioner Minor and a second by Commissioner Maddox. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Option 7, reappoint one eligible applicant, Martha Chauncey, to the school board seat on the Planning Commission for a 3-year term ending June the 30th. And if we appoint Ms. Chauncey, we need to waive the conflicting employment relationship disclosed on Form 4A. So we need 2 motions here then, don't we, Madam Attorney?
Yes.
No? Do we need to waive
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, we waive the conflicting employment relationship.
Do that first.
Yeah, okay, so I'd take a motion if she's the applicant
Chair?
here. And yes,
Mr. Chair, I believe we're gonna have to do that on number 8 too. So if I can, I'll make a motion for reappointing Martha Chauncey in item number 7, and also reappointing Jamie Coleman to the Planning Commission in option number 8, along with the accommodating motion to waive the conflict employee relationship disclosure.
why don't we separate it out? What would,
You could do it together, but as long as you could package it, as long as you get a 2/3 vote.
yeah,
If you get 2/3 vote, you're going to have to go back.
yeah, okay, so let's
Mr. Chair,
start
can
with
we separate those, please?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same. Why don't we start with, waive the conflicting employment issue first, okay? How about Commissioner Maddox, why don't we start with yours as a motion to waive the conflicting piece, seconded by Commissioner Jackson. Okay, and we can keep it open for both 7 and 8 though in this case. So we'll all in favor of waiving the conflicting employment relationship signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chair, just clarification, that's on items 7 and 8.
Yes, that's way, yes, sir, yeah.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So all in favor of waiving the conflicting employment relationship disclosed is signified by saying aye.
Aye.
I think I've got unanimous there. Okay, now, Commissioner Maddox, I'll come back to you on number 7, and you would like to
Made the motion for Martha Chauncey.
Martha Chauncey, and is there a second? I'll
Second that.
Commissioner Jackson. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of Martha Chauncey, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay, Martha. And now with the rules still open as far as waiving the conflicting pieces, the way I read this, Madam Attorney. So now option 8, you had a nominee, Commissioner Maddox? Oh,
Yes, sir.
I'm
I
sorry,
make the motion for Jamie Coleman.
Okay,
Second.
Commissioner Dozier?
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Dozier? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually wanted to separate I'm not sure why we waived the policy before we got to the nomination, unless we were
Yeah.
just going to go straight back to the same nomination we had. So I understand, and I'm sure Jamie Coleman is a great appointee to the Planning Commission. I wanted to pause here because the conflicting employment relationship when it comes to the Planning Commission, I think some people have more conflicts than others. And I would really love to look at this issue in the future. I'm not saying it needs to hold up any particular appointment today, but there are people who work on more county and city projects and have to recuse themselves more often than others who also require this waiver. And I don't have a clear sense of how often that happens. Mr. County Administrator, if you have any comments on this, I'd love to know that. So again, I'm not opposed to Jamie Coleman's nomination, but I do have questions about waiving this policy for some and not, I just want to understand it better. Mr. County Administrator?
Mr.
You want to weigh in?
I
Sure.
really don't specifically, and I don't know if Chastity does. It's certainly something that if the board wanted to look into further, we could certainly table this one and come back to it, and we can provide more details on that. I think I hear you, Commissioner Dozier. You're speaking more generally to the practice. It's certainly one that's available to the board, but I totally hear your concern, understand where you're coming from. In this case, for more information on the specific appointment, we'd probably have to bring that back and provide additional information on it. But I understand your comments are more broadly in terms of the use of this waiver.
Let me ask a question. I don't see a bear. Go ahead, Commissioner Dozier. Yeah, go ahead.
I was simply going to say, just reiterate, I'm not sure this needs to hold up this one appointment. I would be happy to kick it to July if this was something that resonated with other members of the board. But I have heard, and this is no recent Planning Commission members, but I've heard years ago from people who had to recuse themselves on a wide range of issues. And I think that diminishes the power of the Planning Commission. We don't have a full board hearing these issues. And sometimes, I mean, those folks are as skilled, and we want them to be able to comment on different projects that come before the Planning Commission. So I would just like to see a greater analysis of how often members need to recuse themselves, whether there's a difference between working for some law firms or others, or some engineering firms or others, whatever that might be. I think this is just something we've done repeatedly over the years, and it might be in our interest to just pause and look at those numbers in case there's anything we want to clarify.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I've got Commissioner Maddox up next, and then Commissioner Proctor, then Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Maddox?
I'll be brief, Mr. Chair. I'm actually concerned with something totally different on the Planning Commission. I do think that knowing how often someone recuses themselves on the Planning Commission may be something that we need to know. But a bigger concern for me is the diversity on that board. That's the one reason I went ahead and made the motion for Jamie Coleman. I don't know how much she's had to recuse herself because I hadn't been in those meetings, but I do know she provides diversity to the board, and she's very astute in the subject of planning, and so that's why I made my motion. But as we look at our community, I think that all of our committees really should, as far as diversity is concerned, should represent what our community looks like if we have enough volunteers for those committees. And so even if we were in a position of having to consider someone else because of recusal or conflict, I still would want to see a minority in that seat for Planning Commission. I just think it's important, again, that we have a Planning Commission as well as the rest of our committees that represents or mirrors what our community looks like, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Commissioner Proctor, then Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel the sentiments of what Commissioner Maddox just stated. But more importantly, I remember when Diane Williams Cox was seeking re-election to this. Some of my colleagues here said they could not support her on the Planning Commission because she was running for the City Commission. And I still didn't understand but I understand get real technical at times. I remember sitting by Mayor Daley, and he recused himself often as a county commissioner because his wife worked on a lot of stuff. And God knows, while we're looking up stuff, I like to know the number of times that our city commission, which county attorney I used to call the firm, they were made up of Marks, Muskian, Maddox, and Katz. And you're talking about recusing, they hardly could take a vote. And somebody had to step down with a conflict. Those were commissioners. So there's nothing in terms of I doubt seriously the nature or the volume of business of which recusals occur at the planning commission by anybody more than what we saw when the firm was seated as city commissioners and when Daley was here. On occasion, Commissioner Minor has recused himself. If I remember his recusals, Commissioner Maddox has recused himself. I might be the poetess and the most unconflicted person here. I just ain't got nothing. So I don't have. So that's just a part of my bank account situation. I just don't have nothing to be recused about. But if we're going to think global, universally, and address the moment that is in the American discussion at the forefront, I think that Commissioner Maddox has touched all of those points, which across America, the issue of diversity and all of that is most important. So I think the weight of his thoughts are certainly on the scale of an equal and balanced scale. The weight of Commissioner Maddox's thoughts weigh more heavily to me than any potential conflicts, which Commissioner Coleman, as an attorney, would have integrity to recuse if she had a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got Commissioner Lindley, then Commissioner Dozier up. Commissioner Lindley, did you wave me off earlier?
Well, yeah, except I just wanted to say word for word and pound for pound, I agree with Commissioner Maddox.
Okay.
His
Perfect.
very compelling arguments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dozier.
I actually agree with Commissioner Maddox as well. I think Ms. Coleman is a great choice, and I, of course, support the diversity. Commissioner Maddox, I think you and I were both concerned about a active candidate for city or county serving on the planning commission, and you know, we celebrated Commissioner Williams Cox's election a few months later. She sits with us now in our joint planning or, comp plan meetings. So that's a totally different issue. And I think the diversity is critical. But like you said, Commissioner Maddox, I think the recusal part, this was not about Ms. Coleman at all. This was just something that has been on my mind, and I took the opportunity today. So I'm wondering if you would take a friendly amendment and just ask that the next time we have a planning commission appointment or before that, we get some analysis of how often people have needed to recuse themselves and whether or not we need to reflect on that policy a little different. I do not want to hold up her appointment to the Planning Commission. I've said that clearly a few times. So I can support the motion, of course. I just think that's something we should analyze in the future. Commissioner Maddox, would you be willing?
Well, I was going to ask, can we just give staff direction to do that as opposed to, does it need to be melded into the motion? 6 of 1, half dozen.
It's always part of the motion, Mr. Chair, if we want information to come back.
Okay.
Is this in reference to future board appointments or this specific?
Yes, Commissioner Maddox. I'm saying approve Ms. Coleman's appointment, Commissioner Coleman's appointment today. And before we make another appointment in the future, simply get that information about the recusals so we have it for any future appointments, but not holding up anything at this point. As you said, just something to reflect on in the future.
I like to see it be a separate motion, but what I would like to see though is if we could get a look at the diversity prior to us taking up committee appointments. If my second would be okay with that.
Which Chairman, could I ask, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, but Commissioner Proctor, there's a question for you though about will you accept if Commissioner Maddox amends his motion to say, in the future, could we get a makeup of the diversity on the boards? Is that the way I understand that, Commissioner Maddox? And he wants to know, are you okay with that? I'm assuming your answer would be yes, but.
Yeah,
But that
yes,
information is available. That
Yeah,
information is always available in applications. We
Yeah.
get lots of information.
Right.
I think the conversation, Mr. Chairman, as you were speaking to me, is a lot more compelling. Are we doing justice? Are we doing equity? Are we being equitable in our goals to have inclusion, diversity, and the voices of all ringing together in our community? And I think that it's less important to me to know the number of conflicts. I'd rather to know the diversity of every board. It's much more important in this era of history that we are aware of the levels of which our board is acting together to achieve harmony, balance, those things reflective of the community in terms of gender. For those who are very excited by the United States Supreme Court rule yesterday for LGBT, all of those kinds of concerns are weightier to me, but they're very important, Commissioner Dozier. So we can't, I can't place a value or minimize her thoughts and what's important to her values, but to my values and what's a weightier consideration at this time in history is we do need to know what our boards look like. We do need to know those things. The public wants to know. So Commissioner Maddox, yes, I would prefer an understanding where we are in our equity. We do that in our spending, our MBE, our OEV, all of those things we're trying to do better and pull ourselves up as a society. And I think it's the right direction. Thank you.
All right, I've got a motion as amended by himself, Commissioner Maddox, and a second by Commissioner Proctor. Any other discussion on the motion as presented for Jamie Coleman, I believe? I don't have, I'll signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, is there, Commissioner Dozier, do you want to circle back? I think it's probably inherent in the discussion, but if you'd like to make a motion, you're welcome to.
I don't hear any, sorry, Mr. Chair. I heard Commissioner Maddox and others agree that the number of times a planning commissioner recuses himself is important. But I don't hear anyone say that they want that information. I actually think that unlike the diversity issue, which I would love to get more information about, but it is clear in the applications,
Yeah.
the number of times someone recuses themselves or has recused themselves is not clear in any of the documentation we get. So I'm not going to make a motion, but if any of the others of you, forgive me, Mr. Chair, if any of the others of you are concerned about this issue, I think diversity of thought is as important as, maybe not as important. We need diversity in all different ways. And this is something that has been a problem in past years, anecdotally. I'd like to know more.
Okay, Commissioner Lindley, you wanted to speak on this?
I just wanted to say, in the packets of information we get on applicants, I always find it interesting to check the attendance records too. I think to me that is as important as the number of times a person has recused themselves, because that speaks to their real involvement in any of these boards. So there's a lot of information on the applicants, as well as if we look to our to find out who already is on the boards. And, I think Commissioner Maddox's point is right. The Planning Commission is probably the most important citizen appointed board we have. And I agree, it's really important that has diversity in lots of ways. Commissioner Dozier, you're right. But we have a lot of information available to us. And so I think we made a good decision today, and I recommend everybody read all of these applications thoroughly. Thank you.
Good point. Okay, so that's it for this. Mr. Administrator, you've got the add-on agenda item?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, this add-on item seeks the board's approval of a funding agreement with the Florida Division of Emergency Management to receive coronavirus relief funds authorized by Congress in the CARES Act. Last week, Commissioners, the governor announced the state's plan to distribute this funding to counties that were not eligible for the direct funding through the U.S. Treasury. As I mentioned to you in the emails that I provided to you and in our briefings, this is good news, but it's not great news. It will allow us, this funding will allow us to recoup costs directly related to our COVID-19 response, and certainly that's good. However, the eligible uses of these funds are very limited and do not allow us to address, Commissioners, the far more significant challenge we have of dealing with our losses in revenue due to the conscious decision to shut down the economy. As you'll see in this item, our OMB staff are projecting a decrease of up to about $20 million in total revenue losses across this and the next fiscal year, which we have been which have been mitigated by us implementing a hiring freeze, suspending non-essential travel and training, rejecting bids for capital projects, all of which the board is very well aware of. But because of that, we're working with our congressional delegation to advocate for the ability for us to use these funds to offset lost revenues. We believe this could allow us to, or would allow us to, not only address our current and future COVID-related expenses, Commissioners, but also would allow us to balance the current as well as next year's budget with far less in terms of drastic budget cuts or tax increases to make up for the severity of revenue losses that have incurred. And that's, by the way, without Congress adding any additional dollars to what's being contemplated. And I think that holds true, frankly, for all counties in the state of Florida. However, neither, I should note, budget cuts or hiring freezes or tax increases, none of those things, in addition, would add to helping the country, and certainly Leon County, to rebound from the depths of the economic decline that we've faced, obviously. So accordingly, Commissioners, given the very limited use of these funds, this item recommends that the board direct staff to bring back a budget discussion item for the July 14th workshop. This item will provide a complete analysis of all the eligible uses of the coronavirus relief funds, as well as a plan for the board's consideration to seek reimbursements for eligible expenditures consistent with the federal guidelines. With the board's direction, the plan will be brought back to you on July 14th, and it will identify community needs and gaps which may be reimbursable through these funds. As always, we will engage very closely with community stakeholders and industry experts in developing these recommendations, and those that will be brought back to you in the plan. The plan will also recognize, Commissioners, I think importantly, going back to what I said, the potential for Congress to take action and to allow the use of these funds to recover lost revenues. Again, should Congress make that determination in the future, and we will seek, of course, any additional direction that the board may wish to provide on July 14th. So with that, Commissioners, at this point, we're recommending options 1 and 2, which again would give us the ability to pursue the funding agreement to make us eligible for the coronavirus relief funds, as well as to bring you back a complete analysis and plan for your July 14th budget workshop.
I've got Commissioner Proctor, followed by Commissioner Jackson, then Commissioner Minor. Commissioner Proctor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer motion for options 1 and 2.
Second the motion.
Multiple seconds.
I want to commend our staff because here again, this is a whole new, there are plethora of layers of a new public policy related to money, of which we have the brilliant staff who can distill for us that part which fits in the part that doesn't. I think my concern right now is that the last piece of money, we were too small to get some. And we were supposed to go back in and try to fight for the itty bitties to get some of the money. And I would just like to know at the next meeting, Mr. Administrator, if you can give us a report on where we are, because we got nixed because we were too little to get some of the money that that last relief package or one of those packages. So
Commissioner Proctor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to just let you know that this is that money. So we were able to get the governor to release to collectively we as the state of Florida and counties and FAC and we're going to attribute this to the good work of the past president of FAC and for the governor who saw it fair and equitable to release $1.2 billion to those counties under 500,000 in population, and that's what this funding is, and that's what we'll be bringing back to you in terms of the plan.
Excellent. Well, Mr. Chairman, I had pushed my brother, my little baby brother Nick, to go down there and get in a fight and duke it out, and I'm glad that me pushing him up to go get in that fight and duke it out, that we got some. So congratulations, our president of Florida Association of Counties, fighting that good fight and making sure that those of us who didn't get no candy, we're gonna get a little piece now, and I'm really grateful. So thank you so much for your attention, Mr. Administrator. Thank you, Nick, for real, for fighting a good fight, and leadership of Florida Association of Counties.
All right, Commissioner Jackson, did you want to weigh in, or you take your hand down?
Well, I took my hand down, but I think it's important that we be careful and very deliberate when we come back in July, when we are looking at a $878 million revenue shortfall for Florida in the month of April. It's going to be extremely important as we rub the coins together to anticipate that 2021 and beyond will be extremely lean years based on the recovery of such and we don't know how long this is going to sustain. That was just for April. I'm sure the May numbers will, if not in, or will be in shortly. I think we need to be extremely deliberate, careful, and forward thinking, regardless of the money amount that's been awarded and regardless of what we do. So thank you so much for the work you did it was awarded to us, but thank you for the work you're going to do in preparation for that July meeting so that we can get a firmer understanding of where we're headed. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Jackson. Commissioner Lindley, did you want to weigh in? I saw you waved your hand earlier. No?
No, I think I was knocking away a gnat. True,
Okay.
Literally in my absence.
All right, I'll weigh in as well. I mean, this is a real tribute to not only our staff, but Florida Association of Counties, and on a different level, because it's all wrapped up in the congressional thing, is the National Association of Counties. I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road. And as the administrator pointed out, this is good news, not great news. And frankly, if you look at the larger counties around the state, I know Palm Beach, for example, had $250 million handed to them. And it was pretty amazing watching how they went through the division of that and how they met the guidelines and things like that. So hats off to staff and state association and national association. But as they pointed out, if we can't change the way we fund this or way that it's treated, we're going to have an uphill battle. So by no means are we out of the woods yet. There is a motion by Commissioner Proctor. I got multiple seconds. I'm not sure who to attribute it to. I'm assuming somebody here got that. Minor was the second. Okay. All in favor of the motion as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. That's it for me. All right, so because we've got time and this is a regular meeting, and let me apologize. I know last meeting that we had a very specific timeline and a very specific agenda item, and I kind of ran roughshod a little bit, but tonight we'll go ahead and open it up for commissioner comments, and I'll go around. Commissioner, I'm just looking to know, Commissioner Dozier, why don't you step up? Anything for the group?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You surprised me there, going to me first. Don't normally happen. So let me get back to my notes here. I actually have got 3 different issues that have popped up, and I think I can go quickly on a couple of them. I know that, or I think someone brought up the graveyard on Miccosukee Greenway and the reporting about that at our last meeting. Mr. County Administrator, I'm not quite sure. I didn't remember if we had an answer on that or if we were still looking into it. So my question first is, could we get an update on that? And secondly, we have seen a host of these graveyards be discovered in recent years. Some are smaller. There's a Monroe Cemetery off Devoncy Mayo to the Country Club that got a lot of reporting. And I'm wondering if we should look at this issue more broadly, perhaps in the fall, of what do we do when we find unmarked graveyards and how to honor those folks. So, Mr. County Administrator, could you help give some direction here about where we are right now?
Sure. We have an item actually on your next commission meeting agenda on the status report on the graveyard that you referenced. And based on that, we'd be happy to, since that's coming back to you, just take a look at some of the broader issues and see if there's anything that we can, relative to any additional recommendations that we may want to propose to the board at that time.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned, I thought someone had brought this up, but I was pretty ill at the last special meeting, so forgive me for not remembering the agenda item. I look forward to that conversation. The second thing I wanted to bring up, there's been some reporting recently about the Confederate statue that's located on the old Capitol, on the historic Capitol grounds. And whether you saw the reporting in the Democrat or have gotten into this discussion in the past, perhaps a year or so ago, there seems to be a confusion about who owns and maintains the statue. It's 2 Leon County residents. And I would like to know a little bit more about the status of that. There's also been some suggestion about moving the statue and expanding our interpretation, our history with those statues. So this is an issue we see coming up all over the country, and I think it's appropriate, since a lot of folks point back to Leon County as perhaps even having a role in this. Again, I'm vague there because I don't think anyone really has the answer yet. I'm wondering if we can initiate an agenda item that will so we can reach out to the state, so that we can reach out to local historians and others and see if we can figure out what the history is with this monument and what our options may be. So at this point, Mr. Chair, it's simply a motion to get an agenda item and help get us some more information about this monument.
Okay. I've got a motion. Is there, Commissioner Miners going to second that? Okay. Any other discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I've got Proctor. Nick, Commissioner Maddox, are you with us on that? Okay. I think it passed unanimously. I don't see Commissioner Jackson, though. Okay. Wait, there he is. Okay.
Aye.
Aye. 7-0, unanimous. Okay. Commissioner Dozier, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in a completely different subject here, I received an email about styrofoam it's debris that was blowing away from a job site locally. You all may have seen this from time to time. People use styrofoam as insulation, and when the contractor is cutting it, you can imagine how difficult it is to control these little pellets of plastic. It occurred to me that a lot of times we see any kind of contamination issues on a job site, having spent a lot of time on job sites, as mostly contamination of groundwater. If there's an oil spill or something like that, that's when we respond. I don't know if we look at microplastics in the same way. And the constituent who raised this issue made a very good point, that the location of the site, and I don't want to name them because I do believe the owners and the contractors are doing what they can. And this could have happened on any job site in the county, frankly. But the constituent raised a good point that the location and the amount of this debris was going to go directly through our stormwater systems and end up down in Munson, where we have had issues of contamination before. So, Mr. County Administrator, I again, either you or Madam County Attorney, if you have some direction here that this is an issue we can't explore, I would like to know that. But if we could look into whether or not there are rules that we could put in place to control styrofoam or microplastics escaping a construction site, because we know now what a detrimental impact that has on our water quality, both fresh and saltwater eventually. I would at least like to understand that issue a little bit more, and I think it fits right in the pocket of all of our good efforts on the water quality.
Okay, is that in the form of a motion?
I would like that in a form of motion, but Mr. County Administrator, Madam Attorney, do you all see any problem with exploring that subject?
Review it. Yeah.
We'd be happy to review that, yes.
Fantastic. So that would be a motion, Mr. Chair, to allow our staff to review that and bring us back an analysis and potentially options.
Is that a second, Commissioner Lindley?
Well, no, I just wanted to ask a question. Is something like that anything code enforcement, the code enforcement board reviews? I mean, just as litter or, excess debris. I mean, maybe that could be included in the evaluation, but I understand the greater concern, but I was just wondering how that's handled ordinarily.
Okay.
Commissioner Lindley, I mean, I think the county administrator may be able to lean in on this, but my understanding for a job site, and this one particularly, we referred to city growth management because they permitted the job site. That wouldn't be a code enforcement issue. So as being on a job site, if you had an oil spill, you'd be required to take care of it. It might trigger something else. I'm not sure the same is true for microplastics and styrofoam. Is that right, Mr. County Administrator?
Yes. It's a regulatory issue, and we'd be very happy to take a look at that and bring it back.
Okay, so is that a second, Commissioner Lindley?
Yeah. Thank
you. We have a motion and we have a second, a good motion. It's interesting. There may already be something in place. We don't know. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
opposition? Okay. Is that it, Commissioner Dozier?
The last thing I wanted to say, Mr. Chair, is that the It's Not Too Much to Mask campaign is fabulous. I am loving the images, and now that I am camera ready and feel better, I hope to add my comments to all of you who've done that already. I appreciate all the staff. And Mr. County Administrator, I just in looking back over the memes and all of the different ways that our communication team has, innovative ways, has found to really encourage people to stay social distance and wear masks and keep protecting ourselves. It's just fantastic and truly appreciate that. I also wanted to congratulate Commissioner Maddox on a fantastic year with Florida Association of Counties. As our newly elected president, Commissioner McKinney, has said, you didn't get the big celebration this year that we all would have liked. I look forward to doing that at our innovation conference in September. And I also took note that I think Commissioner Minor, perhaps others, but you were named co-chair, I believe, or vice chair of a
Vice chair.
committee that will look at our COVID response. And that is really fantastic. I'm glad that you're taking that leadership role next year. So all in all, Leon is representing ourselves well with facts. And if I could say, just on a personal note, I was also nominated as chair for the Institute for County Government, and that will become official in September. And I'm really excited about that and the expanded role of the Institute. And the county administrator joins me on that board, and it's a pleasure to serve with you, sir. So just a little note on the association and all of our good work. Thank you all very much.
Good,
That's
good
it, Mr.
comments.
Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Jackson, if you're still with us, you're up.
Hey, I'm fixing to run off. I wanted to, congratulations, Commissioner Dozier. And on a point of personal privilege, I wanted to congratulate Miss Jackson. She was recently named the principal at Altside Elementary. And I've got to run off to her appointment meeting tonight. So I appreciate the opportunity to contribute. Great meeting, Mr. Chairman. You're getting to be a real perfect hire for this, and we've dialed up a hurricane or 3 in record time, as well as a pandemic, a budget shortfall, and some civil unrest. This is a really trying time, but I'm really proud to serve with all of you as leaders, and I look forward to great things together. Thanks again. Appreciate you guys.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner
I'd like to just extend congratulations to Commissioner Jackson's re-election. And I think he disappeared on me, but I wanted to give him a shout out on that. And I know that he has, Commissioner Jackson has an appointment out there on Lake Talcott right about shortly. But congratulations, Commissioner. I want to say that too.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Commissioner Jackson, I meant to say the same. I'm glad someone else beat me to it. Thank
Likewise.
you and congratulations.
Likewise, very
Thank you
cool.
all. Thank you.
Give your bride our
Enviable.
best. That's great news for her too. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. All right, Commissioner Lindley.
I don't even know if I want to bring this up or not, but I really just personally still feel like we should, as a county commission, be requiring masks to be worn in all indoor facilities in our county. I know we're trying to encourage it, but you know, the information we're getting as students are going to be coming back into our community, I just think there's not enough of a community buy-in on this. I go all sorts of places. In fact, just yesterday to a big medical center, you know, for a family issue here. And half the people there were not wearing masks, and they were in basically doctor's offices. So I'm really struggling with this. I know other counties have attempted it, and they're, you know, it's not universally popular by any means, but I would just kind of like I don't know whether to suggest an agenda item or just flat out make a motion and see if there's any resonance on that today to have Leon County require masks to be worn indoors as part of our emergency orders. I think I will make a motion on that and see what happens. That's the motion.
There's the motion. As the county, you're going to second that, Commissioner Dozier?
I will second it happily. I think I was trying to get at that last week, and I think in county facilities, it's a very good idea. Thank you, Commissioner Lindley.
And the county attorney, you want to weigh in on this from a...
Yeah, based on the board policy 1-5, it was true under the old policy. It's now true under the one that's been approved by the board. Because the motion's been made at this point in the agenda, it will require unanimous vote of the commissioners attending and eligible to vote, present eligible to vote.
Okay, and nobody, I'll weigh in. I've agonized. Yeah, Commissioner Minor, you want to weigh in on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Commissioner Lindley, so this would be at county facilities, so county staff there as well as any members of the public that would come to those facilities. Is that correct?
No, I'm saying throughout the county of Leon County, public businesses, private businesses, all indoor facilities, not just Leon County. I think we have the authority to do this.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if
Yeah.
I may.
Commissioner Dozier?
Commissioner Lindley, I am struggling with this also. The motion I made last week at our special meeting was to require masks in county facilities to model that behavior. And that's in the plan we approved on May 26th or 21st, that we shall wear masks in county facilities, but we're not requiring. Given what's happened in Alachua County, though, in recent weeks, I don't know if we want to, if we can require masks countywide. I struggle with that, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from County Administrator about Alachua. And I don't know if I can second the motion at this point without more information.
Maybe I might solve us a lot of back and forth. I can't get there tonight, and so if it's got to be unanimous, I would break that. And not that I don't think there's merit in it, but I just got an article from the hospital CEO that said if you look at some of the counties that have mandated versus some that haven't, there's no. I mean, I get the mask piece, and I think how do we continue to impress upon people that it's important and it's appropriate? Business owners are stepping up, and frankly, I see people deciding to go places and not others based on whether or not the employees are wearing masks. I saw a restaurant getting kind of shamed on Facebook the other day. I'm not ready to make that kind of mandate for us as a community, but I'll go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I figure it might have some bearing in the general conversation.
I appreciate that. I mean, I just think modeling and encouraging is just not getting the job done by any means. And somehow I just feel like, there's just got to be another step somewhere along the way. So no, I respect your position, but go ahead.
County Attorney and then Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Dozier, pardon me. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair. So as Commissioner Dozier alluded to, Alachua is a good place to look at in Florida. It instituted the face mask requirement. There was litigation. They rescinded it. As it turned out, shortly thereafter, the court validated the mandatory face mask requirement. Alachua has, as far as I know, most recently, unless there's newer information, reinstituted the mandatory face mask requirement. However, there are certain parameters or exceptions, if you will, involved and associated with that mandatory face requirement that I think would be maybe beneficial if the commission knew about the nuances of that. If the commission wanted to, I could bring back more information about the way Alachua County instituted its mandatory face mask requirement at the next meeting.
Okay, that'd be fine. I mean, in fact, I would be okay with just getting an email that says, here's a little bit of synopsis, because then we don't have to wait. And if I get a yell and a scream and the community feels like it's necessary, or the numbers start trending, then we might look at, making that call. But I think that's fair. Yeah.
I could provide that information.
Okay. Commissioner, so Commissioner Dozier, you're up. And did you drop the second for Commissioner Lindley's motion? You got a little waffly there. I wasn't sure what you...
I can withdraw my motion too. If we can get some more information and we can maybe take another look at this going forward.
Okay, good. Commissioner Dozier, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, yes, because of the back and forth and legal issues on Alachua, first, I am concerned. I think we talked about this last week, that we don't have a meeting for another 4 weeks. So getting an agenda item and considering masks 4 weeks from now, if numbers continue to go up, I'm not sure that helps us as much. There may not be differences between counties that are mandatory masks and those that aren't, but in talking to family and friends who live in South Florida, they did have a mandatory mask policy for a short time. And I'm not even sure if it's still in effect, but when they go out, everybody's wearing masks. As a community, they really understand that is helping them reduce their numbers. We started in a very different place. We didn't have the numbers that Miami or Broward or some of the other counties have. So we don't see people wearing masks universally. And that Facebook post you mentioned, Mr. Chair, I know that was taken down and there was some back and forth about that. we're pitting good neighbors against each other, and that's really disappointing. Again, going back to my comments earlier, I think our staff has done a great job promoting mask use, but it's not universal. We're all getting mixed messages. So I will come back and say, Commissioner Lindley, and again, I think this would take a unanimous vote. If we could simply require masks at the library or at other county facilities, that takes a step in that direction to say, we're going to do this in our house, and we really encourage you to do it in your house. We can do that, I believe, according to the county attorney and county administrator. Yes, okay. And it doesn't get us into the same legal problems that Alachua or others may have faced, but it reinforces the messages that we're putting out that masks are a benefit to us and actually helps us get back to work. So if you wanted to make a motion for county facilities, I would be thrilled to second that, and I would hope we get universal or a unanimous, I keep saying universal, I'm so sorry, unanimous support for that, because it really is in line with what we've all said we want to see in our community.
Commissioner Lindley?
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be a place to start. I mean, I'm assuming, are you saying specifically in the library or in every county facility where people are indoors? Indoor.
Yeah, if what our
locations.
What our standard operating procedures say, that what we approved on May 21st,
Right.
when socially distancing is not possible, staff and the public shall wear masks. That's what it says, but we're not implementing that in our facilities.
So if there is social distancing inside offices, county offices, you would not need. So one or the other, really. If social distancing is not available, mask within county facilities.
For the public and for employees.
You want to weigh in?
For the public and employees. Yeah, I would support that, yes. I would make a motion to that effect.
Sure.
Mr. Administrator, go ahead.
Just because I don't want anyone to be confused on this, Commissioner Dozier's right when she talks about what's in our standard operating procedures. However, it's important to know that right now we're not currently requiring the public or staff to wear masks if they can socially distance. Okay, so and that's consistent with our standard operating procedures. Our standard operating procedures are you shall when you cannot. And so we've made available the opportunity for staff and the public to wear masks in those limited circumstances when they cannot. And so we're currently doing that and abiding by those standard operating procedures. The issue is if the board wants to require the public and require staff to wear masks as they come in as a condition of your admission into a county facility, do you want to require that the public and the county staff are wearing masks? You can do that. And again, we provided that to you at your special meeting as again, an option should the board want to do that. Again, let me be clear. Our standard operating procedures say you shall wear a mask where you can't socially distance. And we are doing that. In those limited opportunities where someone cannot socially distance, then we provide a mask for both the employee as well as the public. We do that currently. The issue is, do you want us to require, again, certainly within the board's purview to do so, that as a condition of entering facilities, and some people have done that. Some communities have done that. Do you want to require masks of the public and of staff? And so that's the clarification there. I just wanted to just so there was no confusion. I just wanted to clarify that. That's all.
Okay, so we have a motion, it sounds like, from Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Commissioner Dozier. Am I right?
To do what? Let's restate.
Yeah, you want to restate that, Commissioner Lindley, since you were the owner. I know Commissioner Dozier kind of wordsmithed it, but she tossed it in your lap, so.
So it would be all county facilities where social distancing is not possible or practiced.
Yeah, and I think
masks would be worn.
Yeah,
And
that-
also for people coming into the facility from the public would be
And I-
required to wear a mask when they couldn't also keep socially distanced from the employees they're doing business with, I assume.
Okay, we're currently doing that.
yeah.
So what you've said we're currently doing. Again, the next step, if the board chose to do that, would be to require that at all times.
which would mean,
I
Mr.
don't
Chair.
understand.
No.
Chair.
Again, if I could just provide clarification, Commissioner Lindley, what I'm saying is that some communities have said in county facilities, period, the public staff must wear masks at all times. And that's something that you can require. What your motion is saying that we would require them for employees and the public when you cannot physically distance. We're currently doing that.
Mr. Administrator, if I can, I think, and I got this education very early on from what you got here from County Attorney Osteen. The word shall means require, means must.
That's correct.
The word may means optional. So because it says shall in our operations manual, that means that what you're asking for we're already doing. So the only thing we could do what the county administrator says and make it mandatory at all times, because shall is already in language that we use.
Okay, so you're satisfied, Mr. County Administrator, that we are doing what I'm trying to get at.
I'm satisfied that
that's in place.
Yes, I'm satisfied that we're doing what you were trying to get at, if that's what you were trying to get at. And if
what
you
I really want to get at is the greater public to wear masks all the time.
Right, but I also wanted to be clear. Right, but I also wanted to be clear that we're not requiring the public, again, as a condition of admittance, like for example into the library, to have a mask on, which the board could do. But I just wanted to make sure that you knew that we're not requiring that. The board could do that. And if that's what you wanted to do, we'd be very receptive to it. But I just wanted to be clear what we are and what we are not doing.
Mr. Chair, on point to the motion, if that's where we're going. I can't support us requiring masks without providing masks.
Without providing them.
So if we're going to go in this direction of requiring masks for county facilities, only way I'll support that is if we are able to provide masks for those patrons who want to come to our facility. The only way I can support it. Thank you, Mr.
Right.
Commissioner Dozier, you want to weigh back in?
Mr. Chair, this is complicated because we don't have a universal here. There are a lot of businesses, a lot of individuals that are doing really well. And I think I keep referencing the library because I've heard from people who are older or have health issues that are concerned about spaces in the library that other patrons may not be wearing masks. So that may be a unique space among our other facilities. Growth management, when someone's dealing face-to-face with someone, as the county administrator rightly said, you're providing masks, as Commissioner Maddox just said, and requiring it in that exchange. For a place like the library, though, I don't want to see our librarians in a position of enforcing masks or encouraging people. If it was a standard, this is a facility that could have a lot of people, and you're not policing where people gather or anything else. Masks are more appropriate than maybe at growth management or someplace else. I don't think that is a universal. I don't think that helps the motion necessarily, but just to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
The library is a particular concern to some of our county residents who are in that special category and may be our most common patrons of the library, quite frankly. So that's really where my mind is right now. And Mr. County Administrator, to answer Commissioner Maddox's question, we have masks available for anyone, say at the library, who doesn't have their own mask coming into the facility. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct. And again, if the board wanted to require it of county facilities, we could obtain very quickly the requisite number of masks if that was something you wanted to do.
Truly my motion, what I want to do is really get to the broader community. Doesn't sound like that's possible. I'm convinced that what we're doing now in county facilities is sufficient. I think we're going to run into more trouble when students come back here in the fall. I think we're going to see an uptick in the virus and illness and hospitalization and everything else. It may not be in the purview of the county commission to somehow have that greater reach to require every citizen who steps inside the county line to be wearing a mask when they come into buildings. But I'm very worried about this. I really don't think encouraging and modeling is doing the job by any means. I understand it's divisive out there. I understand people are resentful of what they're calling mask shaming now. And it's unfortunate that it's come to become a political division again. At this point, I mean, honestly, it sounds like the motion is really not needed as stated. So I'm just going to let it go.
Okay.
And, I'm not hearing a consensus for going that forward in any case. So.
Okay. The floor is still yours. Anything else you'd like to bring up?
No, thank you. That's it.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Good meeting.
Absolutely. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Dozier, congratulations being chair of the ICG. That's a big role. And you've been involved with ICG for years, so I know that's something you're very passionate about. Commissioner Maddox, congratulations on a year well served, sir, at FAC. And then Commissioner Dozier, you actually had brought up two items I had on my list, the grave sites and the Confederate monument. So thank you very much for taking those up. I really just had one thing in addition to that. I stopped by the Supervisor of Elections website building this morning and took a look at the leaks, and also spoke with Mark early about some of the other things that were coming up in the coming months. And I asked him what more we could do to help him with the elections. And he basically said, well, because of the pandemic, we're having trouble recruiting volunteers for our poll workers. So I spoke with the county administrator this afternoon about whether or not county employees could be perhaps encouraged to volunteer on election day with a little bit of training before then to prep for the election day to help fulfill some of that need. And county administrator said that that's actually already part of the policy. So very happy to hear that, and just wanted to thank the county administrator for getting back to me on that very quickly, and then going one step further and offering to promote that as an option for county employees to use that as part of their administrative leave. So, and also he's going to be reaching out to Supervisor Early to coordinate and collaborate on that. So thank you to the county administrator, and also for county employees that are interested in doing an additional public service and volunteering on election day to help out with free and fair elections. Hope you will consider doing that, both for the primary and for the general. And that's all I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Great.
And thank you, County Administrator.
Thank you. Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank County Administrator for the update on the Kearney Center, the FEMA reimbursement efforts, and to extend shouts out to Mr. Kearney for the great work. Thank you, Vince. Wonderful report, clear, a lot of detailed. I appreciate that. We appreciate that. I'd like to give a shout out to the Florida State football team. Mr. Wilson, young man who had the wherewithal to talk about a few things. The march by Florida State football team, significant stuff, and I think that they're on the way to having a tremendous season. The comments offered by Commissioner Dozier on styrofoam and all of that make me think of the wonderful contributions that Mr. Kim Williams makes, the Marpan community. And I'm wanting to make sure, Vince, that we're able to do everything that we can as speaking of styrofoam and trash and plastics and separating stuff. I really think that citizen needs all the help, assistance to down, let's say he's in a downward spiral of giving up certain services, and I think that we have to be vigilant to help facilitate that, as well as to come up with options of what we're going to be doing with styrofoam and plastics and stuff that we may not have the services of Mr. Williams. Great, but he's given us notice, and I think that we shouldn't sit on that. Also, I'd like to ask this board for your support of my travel request to go to the 1963 commemorative march on Washington, which will be in August on the 28th. It includes efforts to talk about what's been really talked about in my district and community: police reform, new policies that connect our communities to a more humane, equitable policies at the local levels, well as state and national. And I ask your endorsement, make a motion for travel to the commemorative march in August of this year.
I'll second that.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion for that? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next up, Commissioner Proctor.
Okay,
Mr.
thank you,
Chair,
Commissioner.
on point to that motion, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Commissioner Maddox.
Does that make the travel clear for any commissioners who would like to go? Or is that just specifically for Commissioner Proctor's travel?
I'm not sure. I think it's a specific ask, so if you'd like to do the similar thing, I think you'd have to go down the same path.
I'll make a
Mr.
similar motion.
Well,
Okay,
let me finish Commissioner Proctor, and then I'll come because you're next. Yeah. So,
Okay. Now,
and if
now,
anybody else would like to circle back, let me know. But Commissioner Proctor, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I was seeking the permission, but not a mandate that I go, but I'm looking at COVID spike numbers. I may not go, but
Right.
I hope that the atmosphere is bearable enough that I might make that trip. And with your permission, I can. I want also to note that Georgia had a debacle for the election last Tuesday, and it serves notice to the state of Florida. I want commissioners and ask for support of our ask of our governor that he has ignored 67 supervisors of elections who have asked him for help in preparing for August and November's election. I'm reaching out to the cabinet, to the Democratic Party, Republican Party, Florida League of Cities, the Florida Association County, anybody who can't get the governor and cabinet's attention that our supervisors have warned that we don't have enough workers to work the polls. And like the previous issue that Commissioner Minor brought up about shortages, this is a serious letter. Rachel is gonna share with you all some concerns that have been raised. It's very important. And I think that we have to weigh in to make sure some of y'all on the ballot and some of us are not, but it's still very important that Florida functions well. Commissioners, United States Supreme Court stepped big yesterday. I anticipate that Vince will, the county attorney, will be able to adopt. I don't know if that ruling said with all deliberate speed, which nobody knows how fast that is, but I would expect that we would make adoption and adaptation within our policies for such a quantum leap that was cited as a civil rights measure on yesterday. Finally, I want to say that Commissioner Matlow and I will host a community listening session at the Old West Primitive Baptist site on Lake Bradford Road this Friday morning as a part of our Juneteenth celebration, Juneteenth conversation dealing with police reform. There's been a lot of on the street, but we've got to have voices which funnel into public policy. We're inviting proposals, written white papers, position statements, and recommendations to be written that we might codify what the community is saying, so that some of that can reach into the negotiations with the next extension of police contract. The farm share event, which I will host, I invite you all to participate, gather with me on Saturday morning. It's going to be a free drive up to all of this community. This probably be the largest Southside summer gathering. And if you want to come down and help us distribute, it's going to be major. And so that'll be at the fairground. We're going to be giving out free masks and free food, but it's got to be an in-car drive-through situation with voter education and voter registration information available. And then my final today, Commissioners, was a wonderful meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a great meeting. I said earlier that this is an excellent commission. And, you know, you can tell we're an excellent commission because our county administrator and our county attorney, they keep their head down right in the whole meeting. And when you ain't cooking with gas, they'll be primping and, you know, trying to look good on camera. But we coming out with such lightning bolts out the sky, such amazing genius statements that is all that they can do to keep up with both the creativity and genius of our commission. We have a great commission. I've always enjoyed you all, and certainly no less right now. Next year, commissioners, I'd like to offer the proposal that Juneteenth be a Leon County paid vacation. Juneteenth represents this Friday, 19th of the 19th of each year that Texas was the last state that received word that slavery was over. And here in Tallahassee, we recognize on a house that some have attributed to one of my great uncles, George Proctor, at the Knott House, which a tree almost fell on the other day. But the Emancipation Proclamation was read on the steps of a house that Uncle George built over there on Calhoun and Park Avenue. But see, Texas is slow. They still slow out there, and they had to wait a little while. But I want to propose that we make the significance of slavery, the contribution of African Americans to this community, the bricks that slaves put down that are underneath Adams Street, bricks that are underneath the black tar on Monroe Street, the bricks in the Florida Capitol that has two Confederate markers out in the front yard that free black labor built, the number of unmarked black graveyards, which, you know, shows that black lives didn't matter then. They just left out in the wilderness. Golf courses are over, buildings are over, neighborhoods are over. With all of the contributions that African Americans have made in this community, I'm asking that this county make Juneteenth, let us recognize it as a paid day off with a vacation, recognizing, remembering, celebrating however people want to. But I believe that for the contributions and sacrifices that people who lived 153 slaves out there on Goodwood Plantation never could leave, never could go nowhere, never got a vacation. They were slaves on Goodwood Plantation. It's that kind of story that this county has beneath its soil, and dead people will never know. That I make the motion that we create an item to bring back that Juneteenth be a paid vacation for everybody in Leon County in the remembrance of slaves and Africans who've been underpaid and given so much for free for so long that nobody even counted as being worth nothing. That's my motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll second the good reverend's motion.
We have a motion and we have a second. How do we do that? Just come back, agenda item? Okay. All right, so we have a motion, I have a second. Commissioner Dozier, you want to weigh in?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to appreciate Commissioner Proctor and Maddox for making the motion and second. I'm all for the agenda item. I would love to see our community recognize Juneteenth more broadly. And so if it's a paid holiday for county, that's a good signal. But I hope this agenda item lets us imagine how we could recognize this as a community-wide holiday in the future as well. So thank you, gentlemen, for bringing it up.
Okay, Commissioner Maddox, you wanted to weigh in?
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Proctor. Reverend Commissioner Proctor was actually reading my mind because I had talked to the county attorney about this and actually had reached out to the NAACP to see if they would be interested in partnering and bringing this forward to see if we could do exactly what he said, make it a countywide paid holiday, but also come up with what Commissioner Dozier said, some kind of celebration and something in celebration of Juneteenth. So you guys were right there where I was thinking. I think the governor of Virginia might have made it a statewide holiday, paid holiday, and I think it's good form for us as a commission to consider it with us being and showing the diversity that we have, not only on this commission, but in past commissions and the respect that we've shown by this commission and past commissions for holidays like Juneteenth and Emancipation Day. So thank you, Commissioner Proctor, for bringing forward. I look forward to the agenda item.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. I don't see anybody else in the queue to speak. All in favor of the motion from Reverend Proctor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Commissioner Proctor, floor is still yours. All right, thank you. Commissioner Maddox, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First things first, I want to thank the commission for their support during my year as Florida Association of Counties president. I know I appointed a few of you on different boards and you guys did not let me down. I believe even Commissioner Proctor co-chaired one of those boards for me and had to step up and actually chair a meeting and did very well with it. But we had a trying year, but we got through it. But I know that without the support of you guys, I wouldn't have been able to even be considered to be president of Florida Association of Counties. So I wanted to send my thanks to each and every one of you for giving me that opportunity and for supporting me through that opportunity. The second thing is happy Juneteenth. Thank you, Commissioner Proctor, again for bringing forth that motion. I look forward to the agenda item coming back. And then I want to speak finally to what to the conversation we had with the sheriff earlier. That's a very important conversation that we had. I look forward to seeing what staff does with the sheriff as well as our law enforcement throughout our community to see what we can do as a commission to help their efforts and what they're trying to do. I think that the sheriff brought forth a very good point in that we can create the police review committees and they can help us out on instant cases of where we feel like there's been some kind of police brutality or some kind of overuse of police force. But you can't do that without also addressing the system itself, which is the policies that we have in place that the sheriff and police departments here in Tallahassee have in place when it comes to the way they actually go about policing. And so to hear the sheriff say that he's willing and ready to bring forth or on his own even a committee to look at those policies is pretty exciting. I think it's a step forward to not just addressing the things that are going on now, but addressing the future and what policing looks like in our community in the future. And hopefully those kind of policy committees for our sheriff and police department can become something that other sheriffs and police departments try to model, because I think that is the key to truly changing the system within which our policing is done, and not merely treating what's happening right now and have it continue to happen over and over again. So with that, along with also once you change that system, you have to actually hold people accountable for operating within that system. And so I'm pretty excited about what the sheriff committed to there. So, Mr. Chair, that's all I have. You're doing a great job of getting us through these meetings, man. I'm so glad I'm not chairing now to navigate through this. Rick, hopefully Commissioner Meyer, once you actually take over as chair, you won't have to deal with it, but at least you have a chair before you that can kind of help you through it, because this is this is no small feat trying to do this thing virtually. I tried it during a couple of my Florida Association of County meetings, and the confusion that happens is paramount. So I look forward to seeing you take over as chair, Commissioner Minor. But Commissioner Lowe's, you're doing a magnificent job. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I never like to take a lot of time because it's the end of a long meeting anyway, but just wanted to say how much I'm enjoying working with Vince and Alan and Mary and Stephanie and everybody else in county administration. You guys get a lot of praise, so I don't want this to go to your head, but I will second and more the comments that the commission members have made, that you're a great group to work with, and just appreciate the collegiality and the teamwork that goes into that. Also want to give a quick shout out to the county attorney staff, everybody. I could name them. We're not a big group, but everybody is working really hard. They're doing all the day-to-day work in challenging times, which, as everybody knows, based on everything everybody does, this is more challenging and there's more to do than the norm. So everybody's doing a great job, and just want to say thank you to that group as well. That's it.
Nice.
But
Mr. Administrator.
And thank you, Chastity. We were not expecting that. We don't, no, but we appreciate it. And commissioners, congratulations all the way around. Ditto everything everyone said. And Commissioner Maddox, congrats, coming off a great year representing us so well at FAC, and all of your chairmanships. And Commissioner Dozier, I served with her on the intergovernmental or the Institute of Government Board. And again, just congratulations and appreciation all the way around. And I saw Commissioner Jackson get back on. A big congratulations to him as well. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. As long as we're passing out accolades, I think the IT staff needs a huge round of applause. Let me tell you, from having chaired this meeting, as many of y'all have been in those meetings on some of the other platforms, this has been really spectacular. You guys have outdone yourselves. So, and for Kristen and Rick, nice appointments within FAC. That's well deserved. And for Nick, a year well done. I know the run, and it's not easy. So enjoy the past president. That's the best job going. So two quick things. Can we, the comment Commissioner Minor made about getting volunteers for the poll working, can we do something from a messaging standpoint just to the community at large with Matt, and ask that we get the word out and try and spread I mean, we all have the ability within social media, but I think it wouldn't be a bad idea. I mean, if the county employees can do it, that's great, and we can incent them to do that or help, but I think more importantly, if we get the message out, there are certainly a lot of people, I think, that have time on their hands. And then Commissioner Lindley, to your comment about mandating wearing masks, I mean, I have read a lot about this, and I've gone round and round, and it's hard. Clearly wearing masks makes a difference. Mandating them steps a little, in my opinion, a little further than I'm willing to go. But I want to impress upon people that we're by no means out of the woods yet, and we're by no means in the place where we can take our, take a step back and say, aren't we in great shape? And I will tell you that since we're not meeting for a month, there's no reason why, if things start turning a different way, and I talk to the administrator every day or so, that we might say, you know what, maybe we need to look at this in a different light, and we could call an emergency meeting if we felt like that necessitated it. So I don't want to say we would never do that. It's certainly not something I want to do, but you're right to say that at some point that may become something we consider. I think right now, whether we're lucky or we're good, the numbers in our county continue to be pretty good relatively to most of the other counties. I've talked to our hospital CEO at TMH the other night, and frankly, the entire protest so far has been pretty harmless, and I'm counting my blessings with that. It just so far, my feeling is nobody's gotten seriously hurt, and we don't have any major damage in the community, and we've let the people that want to protest, which I think is important. So anyway, it's an honor to serve with you guys. We continue to try and solicit public input. I know this is kind of trying times for a lot of people, and thank you to everybody here, and we stand adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you. Good night. Peace out.